Start the meeting with the salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call.
Ms. Clark.
Here.
Mr. Dakota.
Here.
Mr. Dillon.
Here.
Ms. Doherty.
Here.
Mr. Hoey.
Here. Here.
Here.
Okay. Mr. Superintendent, Spotlight and Excellence, summer program, school program.
Thank you. We seem to be.
Still too hot. It's still too hot. The microphones are way too hot still.
How's that?
Well, I'll speak from over here. So thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, committee members. We're really proud of the work that occurred during the course of the summer, as you know, with the summer school program. As we have with this current school opening, the guidance from the state is ongoing, evolving, and in some ways coming in so late that it's difficult for decisions to be made. And our summer school program was placed in the same predicament, and under the leadership of Ms. Desmond and Carolyn Rocheleau and some of the other speakers you're going to hear from today, they did yeoman's work to make sure we could support our kids here in Lowell with a combination of remote and in-person programming. Ms. Desmond?
Thank you. In just a moment, I will have Carolyn Rocheleau speak to the programming. Just some of the highlights I want to mention, and I have mentioned it in some previous meetings. This year, we were able to reallocate some spring funding that was not utilized to be able to serve more than 3,000 students in our summer programming. We used various learning models, in-person, hybrid, and remote, and we were able to service more than double the number of students that we serviced in 2019. We were able to run all of the programming that we've run in the past, along with some new programming that enabled middle schoolers to receive specialized education in some content courses that were missed in the spring remote learning process. We were able to provide 8th grade to 9th grade Jumpstart program to help prepare our students for the Freshman Academy, as well as provide some credit recovery for some of our high school students. So at this time, I'm going to introduce Carolyn Rocheleau, who is our after-school and summer school 21st century coordinator, and she can explain a little bit more about our programming. Introduce yourself.
Good evening, Superintendent Boyd, members of the Cabinet, and members of the Board School Committee. My name is Carolyn Rocheleau, and as the coordinator of special programs, I oversee our after-school and summer programming. I'm pleased to be here this evening tonight to speak about the exceptional summer programs that the Lowell Public Schools will be able to provide our students this summer. As you heard, Ms. Desmond mentioned that we would offer programs to over 3,000 students this summer, which is double what we've done in 2019. We're extremely grateful for our staff and for the support that we have seen. We were able to provide in-school services to more than 200 students this summer. This could not have happened without a lot of support. particularly from the Grindelwald, Pulse and Fear, and our fantastic custodians who ensure that all of our buildings have the appropriate materials needed, as well as PPE, so that students and staff feel safe. We also were able to really trial great virtual programming. All of our virtual programming is able to be done synchronously, which means in person with students logging on to their teachers. We had great success. Teachers gave very positive feedback. Parents and students were very happy to log in. We had a lot of high-quality learning for our students. And I'm going to let you speak next to both Christina Adams, who is the coordinator of our special education programming, as well as Lisa Tender, who led our early childhood summer programming. So you can get a sense of how it went with in-person learning this summer. I just want to thank all of you for your support and just let you know how proud we are and how grateful we are that Robin Desmond also provided such great leadership for us this summer so that we were able to run good programs for our kids who deserve nothing but the best here in Lowell. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolyn.
Okay, great.
Name.
Good evening. My name is Christy Adams. I'm the program coordinator at the Dr. Janice A.D. Day School and assisted with the special ed summer program. I would first like to start off by thanking you for providing us the opportunity to return to the building and work directly with the students. We have not seen many of these students since school closed in March because they struggle with remote learning. We appreciate the support of the school committee, the public school administrators, and particularly the support from the special education administration. The dedicated staff that maintains positive attitudes and flexibility as we face daily and unexpected challenges. The bus drivers and monitors for their patience as we work with the students and families in regards to wearing masks while riding the school bus. The patience of the custodial staff as we work through the new COVID cleaning procedures, and the families that supported us and remained patient and understanding as we navigated together through uncharted waters. As you may know, the DSL program consisted of a blended learning program. Families were given the choice to participate in building days only, 2 days per week, or blended learning, which is a combination of in the building and remote, as well as remote only. Average daily student attendance was 38 to 50 students per day out of the expected 63 students assigned to each cohort. Cohorts consisted of Group A students, which attended on Mondays and Tuesdays, Group B, which attended on Thursdays and Fridays, and the program was closed on Mondays for deep cleaning. A remote-only classroom was also offered to parents, with 71 students participating, not including the speech-only students. Students also participated in teletherapy sessions with the speech and language pathologist as well as occupational therapists. We were fortunate enough to have ongoing program support on a daily basis from the special education social worker, psychologist, autism support specialist, and Sharita Gray, as well as the speech and language pathologist, occupational therapist, and the full-time clerk and nurse. The program followed a consistent daily schedule across the classrooms in order to plan for program cleaning, holiday and bathroom transitions, and movement breaks. The program is provided with the various PPE requirements such as face shields, gloves, gowns, and masks, with extra masks available for staff and students as needed. The PPE guidelines were strictly followed by staff, which resulted in modeling of expectations for students. We adhere to a strict cleaning schedule, including classroom flooring made possible by scheduled movement breaks, which consisted of 3 stations, made movement alley and hallway, and obstacle course in the blue middle station. The blended learning students that were scheduled to participate in remote learning on their alternate days were invited to Zoom into classroom work sessions and circle time in an attempt to maintain the same schedule even while at home. Hands-on materials were also provided to the home for parent requests. In order to take this opportunity to better prepare the students and families for the PPE requirements, parents and teachers were provided with a list of videos, visuals, social stories, and token systems to review with the students to assist in increased tolerance to wearing masks. Staff were asked to schedule daily time to say, to watch the videos, listen to the songs, and have students wear the mask in hope of increasing time as the weeks progressed. As a result of the hard work put in place by the staff and families, as well as the ongoing modeling of PPE expectations by staff, we were able to see an increase in the number of students wearing masks for the duration of the day or part of the day, as well as while riding the bus by week 2. With parent permission, we were able to take pictures of students wearing the mask before home to the families the last week of the ESY program, in order for the parents to continue to reinforce wearing masks with their children until school reopens. Knowing that many of these students struggled with remote learning in the spring, we incorporated the use of technology during the day in an attempt to take the opportunity to expose and teach them the students that struggled with remote learning in regards to how to access it while we have them in the building. The Special Education Department provided an iPad for each student to access during the day, and students participated in activities using online platforms such as Seesaw. Parent feedback in regards to the ESY program is very positive. Parents were thankful for the opportunity provided, the support from the staff, and the teaching and modeling for their children in regards to PPE equipment and social distancing. They were also pleased with the thoughtfulness and thoroughness in which the program was developed, and our ability to follow the COVID guidelines put in place by the various state agencies. As we all know, the program is only as successful as the team supporting it. We were very lucky to have the support of the dedicated staff of Lowell Public Schools to assist in providing a safe and successful learning environment to the students this summer. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. Before we continue with the spotlight on excellence, people at home can't hear the audio. So if someone can give a brief overview of the remaining, when we get to the callers on the other motions, we'll just have to ask them to speak clearly and, I don't know, it just...
Don't the mics need to be turned down? I mean, can we...
No, I mean, she's playing with it in there. The closer you get, there's more feedback. She's got to adjust it out there, so it's just going from microphone to microphone, it's getting muffled. There were four, but
What I will do is, we had 3 speakers tonight, but Carolyn Rocheleau was the first speaker. Christine Adams, who ran our extended year special education program, who just spoke about the success of the in-person instruction that occurred, students wearing their masks, having all of the PPE that was necessary to run a successful program. And then the third caller would have been Lisa Tenskar, who ran she was the site manager of our early childhood summer school program, which was a 5-day-a-week in-person summer school program at the Lincoln School. All of these programs were run within our own schools. One, the extended school year program at the Pine Arts, and the early childhood program at the Lincoln. And I think, again, both speakers were just speaking to the fact that the children and our families and our staff all adhered to the requirements of social distancing and using PPE and all of those requirements to make successful in-person experiences for our kids this summer. And so I think at this point, just knowing that we are having some issues with the feedback, I think we will just open it up for any questions the committee might have on the summer programming.
yeah. Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Ron. I just want to make a comment. I think that, first of all, it was an excellent program from everything I've heard about the different groups of students that were served this summer. The fact that it was 3,000 students, I'd like to make a note of that number, because I believe when we're looking at 25% of our students coming back in the fall, I believe that number is somewhere around 3,500. Wouldn't it be?
It is. The only clarification, Ms. Desmond, I believe your number is across both in-person and remote. And
So it wasn't 3,000 all doing in-person, okay. But it is still a huge number, more than twice what we've done in the past, and pulled together very quickly, and obviously, real kudos to the team that did that. I just want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Ms. Clark?
I think just the other thing to point out is that the programs that were in person were pre-K all the way through 12th grade. So it really did span the full distance of our learners in the schools, and everyone complied, and teachers were successful, and students were successful, and families helped to support this endeavor, including transportation to and from these programs, correct? Yeah.
That's right, and I don't want to exclude, the high school also had an ELL program that had a hybrid model, and there was in-person the last 2 weeks, so I didn't want to leave them out, because they worked really hard to make that successful as well.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone that was involved with the summer program and the callers tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't hear you, but appreciate you calling in. Next, we have minutes. We need to approve a few sets of minutes. Yeah, Ms. Doherty?
I move to approve the minutes 4.1 to 4.8 all at once.
Okay, yep, bundle, thank you. Do I have to read them all? All right, so we'll bundle 4.1 to 4.8 meetings, special meetings, approval of the special meeting, special meeting, special meeting, special meeting, a school committee, special meeting, regular meeting. All the, motion by Ms. Doherty, second by Ms. Martin. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Permission to enter.
Thank you.
Just 1 second, 1 minute, please. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Oh, these microphones are at a much better volume now.
Yeah.
Permission to enter is, the recommendation is approval as written. If there are any questions on individual items, staff is available to answer.
Any questions on the permission to enter? Motion to approve. Sure, Mr. Dillon? Did you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I did. I actually don't have it in front of me now, but could you, maybe, Dr. Boyd, could you just talk about what this stuff means for our preschool? It's a lot of preschool staffing, correct?
Ms. Desmond, can you share?
Sure. We have a Community Preschool Partnership Initiative grant, which allows us to provide supports for students not only within our program, but also in programs throughout the district as a partnership. So that's the first several PTEs that are listed on the permission to enter. Then we also have some other support services that we are able to collaborate with as well through this community partnership grant.
Sorry, just as a follow-up, so is this on top of things that we've done in the past? So, a lot of this new?
So the Community Preschool Partnership Initiative grant we have had in the district for a few years now.
Okay.
So this is continuing these partnerships.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Any further follow-up? Mr. Hoey?
Yes, through you, Mayor, to the superintendent. Going off of what Mr. Dillon said, when I look at Little Sprouts down there, is that connected to, I know, I forget how many years back, I think it was 2 years ago, we got $5 million here, the federal government sent to community teamwork to basically bring back Head Start, because I feel like they made a few mistakes. And then there was some talk about, are they going to use our teachers, LPS teachers? Do we have teachers that are involved in Little Sprouts, our own teachers? That's my question.
Ms. Desmond, do you have an answer to that?
I do not, but I will get that information for the next meeting.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Need a motion to accept by Ms. Clark, seconded by Mr. Dillon. Roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? 6 yeas, 1 absent, approved.
Thank you. So next is the motions. How many speakers do we have on the motion? Four speakers, okay. So if you're listening at home, you already know by now that the sound isn't very good when it's going from the phone to the microphone. So when you call up and you speak, please try to make your point, speak clearly and be brief. Otherwise, you probably won't get your point understood to the viewers at home. Thank you. Okay, so motion, let me read the motion. Sure, motion by Ms. Martin, Ms. Doherty, requesting that the Lowell School Committee vote to assert that racism is a national public health crisis affecting the health, safety, educational experience, and outcomes of all students, especially the majority of students of color in the district. This will require immediate, ongoing, long-term responses and action from the Lowell Public Schools to affirm our steadfast commitment to support efforts both nationally and locally aimed at understanding, addressing, and dismantling racism in all its forms from our public schools. And we'll go to the speakers first, and then, thank you.
Hi, Caitlin. This is Rhonda, and I'm just calling to speak. You're registered to speak on 6-1. You can just state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes to speak on the topic. I'm going to turn the microphone right now. Go ahead.
Just remind them to speak clearly and...
Hi, my name is Caitlin Colberg, and my address is 158 Concord Road in Billerica, Massachusetts. May I begin?
Yes, go ahead.
My name is Caitlin Colberg, and I'm a 5th grade teacher at the Daly Middle School. I'm calling in tonight to speak in support of the motion to assert that racism is a public health crisis affecting the health, safety, and educational experience of students of color. According to Chandra L. Ford, who is a professor of community health services at UCLA, public health involves societal efforts to create conditions which optimize the health of all people. Ford explains that whole segments of our society are systematically blocked from the possibility of optimal health on the basis of race and ethnicity, and that therefore racism is very much a public health issue. A commonly used definition of racism is the systematic advantaging of some groups of people over others on the basis of race. Activist Ruth Wilson Gilmore goes a step further by defining racism as group-differentiated vulnerability to premature death. Her definition makes clear the fact that racism has real-life impacts on people's well-being and life expectancy. According to a June 15th article by the Pew Charitable Trust, Black women are up to 4 times more likely to die of pregnancy-related complications than white women. Black men are more than twice as likely to be killed by police as white men, and the average life expectancy of African Americans is 4 years lower than the rest of the U.S. population. This problem is not unique to Lowell. It is a national problem. However, just because this problem is bigger than Lowell does not mean that Lowell does not have a responsibility to do something about it. Racism is a public health crisis here in Lowell. The voices of our community members in recent public forums make that blatantly clear. We as a school district must first acknowledge that this is a problem if we are to ever effectively provide the equitable educational opportunities we strive to create for our students. As any teacher can tell you, any issue that impacts the social, emotional, or physical health of our students has a direct impact on their ability to do their best learning. Many students of color disproportionately face issues such as housing insecurities, food insecurity, their own physical health issues, and their family's physical health issues, to name a few examples. They are prevented from putting their full focus into their learning. Therefore, I stand firmly in support of the motion to declare racism a public health crisis. I call upon the district and our school staff to listen to the voices of our community members of color when they say that racism is impacting their health and their educational outcomes. Only by acknowledging this reality can we begin to truly empower our diverse student population. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello everyone, my name is Curtis Chantabone and I live at 82 East Meadow Road in Lowell, Massachusetts. I am a sophomore at Lowell High School and I'm here to speak about racism endured in Lowell High School. So I have attended and held multiple protests in Lowell, and one of my protests was about Lowell High School and how they tried to silence the voice of students who have endured racism. I'm in consistent contact with Dr. Boyd, Ms. Latifah Phillips, who is the Chief Equity and Community Empowerment, and we're currently trying to tackle racism in the public schools. And if our superintendent, Dr. Boyd, and the Chief of Equity and Community Empowerment can acknowledge that there is racism within public schools, then I think that we have a problem on our hands. These students are being mentally affected by racism, and which can lead to suicidal thoughts or other mental health issues, which, of course, affects their health. And so when there's racism within the public school, it affects everyone. It will affect them through their entire life. Thank you for letting me speak today.
Thank you.
Can I have a point of privilege? I just want to recognize Curtis. Curtis, one of our student leaders. He also was the student that at the very beginning of the pandemic took it upon himself to make face masks at home and to donate those out. So I just want to recognize Curtis's leadership. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You're welcome.
Go ahead.
Hello, my name is Monica Lundberg. I live at 12 Elizabeth Drive here in Lowell. The Dean of the Boston University School of Public Health, Sandro Galea, defines a public health crisis in this way, quote, "The problem must affect large numbers of people. It must threaten health over the long term, and it must require the adoption of large-scale solutions." Systemic racism fits these criteria, and the evidence that it does so is so overwhelmingly abundant that I will not waste time discussing it. The real question before this committee tonight It's not whether racism is a public health crisis, but why we should publicly acknowledge that fact. It is true what they say, the first step to solving a problem is acknowledging you have it. But it is more than that. It is about intentionality and accountability. By supporting this motion, you send a message. You say that working to dismantle racism in our education systems is a priority, one that has not been shunted aside in the chaos of the pandemic. You say that we as a district are committed to doing the work, to reviewing our policies and practices, to educating ourselves and each other, to looking at our curriculum with a critical eye. By passing this motion, you say that this matters, that what our children learn about race at school, explicitly and implicitly, has long-term impacts. Our district, like the vast majority of districts in America, has a long, long way to go. Racism permeates our curriculum in insidious ways. Let me give you an example. Just this past spring, in the packets for remote learning for first grade, there was a series of stories about leaders. One week, the story was about Harriet Tubman leading the Underground Railroad. It never mentioned race at all. Think about that for a moment. What does that tell our children? Besides curriculum, there is ample research that shows that racial bias in schools has huge and long-reaching consequences. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, school to prison pipeline. The phrase claims to globally sum up the research-proven ways that implicit bias impacts children of color who are disproportionately disciplined more harshly as early as preschool. Educators have some of the greatest responsibilities in our society, including the responsibility to prepare children for the future and the responsibility to impart the background knowledge, habits of mind, and critical thinking skills that will inform public discourse for the next generation. There is perhaps no other institution that has as much opportunity to dismantle racism as schools. I urge this committee to pass this motion as a way of expressing the commitment to working for racial justice in our schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Hi, my name is Marissa Shea. I'm a teacher at the Daly Middle School, and before I begin, I just want to acknowledge the land where I'm calling in from and the land where your meeting is taking place. The land is called Indakina, and this is what the land has been called for over 12,000 years. Indakina is the traditional ancestral homeland and waterways of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki people, past and present. And for those of you more specifically, you are on Pennacook land, and I acknowledge and honor with gratitude the land and the waterways and Onabak, which means humans, who have stewarded Indakina through the generations for thousands of years. I think this is a good motion, and I want to thank Ms. Doherty and Ms. Martin for bringing this motion forward. I said this to the City Council, and I'll say it again to you all, that the students that had family members who contracted or died from COVID were overwhelmingly Black students, and we don't have a large Black population at the Daly. So this is anecdotal, and it's just one person's experience, but the statistics back up the claim that, yes, racism is a public health crisis, and I've seen its effects on students firsthand. And I like this motion for another reason. Lately, I've heard people say, oh, well, we can't talk about racial justice now. It's important, but we really need to focus on what we're doing. it will detract from our main goal, and we need to figure out these other things first, and then we'll get to it. But isn't that always the case? I mean, every couple of years, the issue of race in America receives national media attention, and then the media moves on, and racial justice just gets pushed to the side again. So Ms. Doherty and Ms. Martin, I think tonight you are showing our school community something important. You're showing us that we can be less than 2 weeks away from school in an extremely stressful situation with negotiations ongoing. But hey, even in the midst of this, we can still advocate for racial justice. And so this is an important lesson for all of us. We can be in the middle of a pandemic and still provide teachers with anti-racism professional development. We can be in the middle of a pandemic and we can still prioritize hiring people of color to teach our students. We can have multiple priorities. In this part of the country, it has become very easy to say Black Lives Matter. I drove into Boston recently and saw a massive billboard sponsored by a bank that said Black Lives Matter. And then driving out of Boston later that night, someone banged on my car window, and it was a Black woman crying, clearly in a state of crisis. She had just been kicked out of a shelter, and she was begging for me to help her. And all I could do was give her some money. The light had turned green. I was holding up traffic, and then I drove away. And it doesn't mean anything for Boston to declare boldly that Black Lives Matter if Black folks in the city are not treated as if they matter. And so we all know the saying that talk is cheap, and actually talk is free. And evidently now, if you're a bank, you can co-opt the slogan Black Lives Matter and even make a profit off of it. So let me be clear, I'm not saying that this motion is cheap or bad, or that I'm not grateful that it's been brought forth, because I am grateful. What I'm saying is that this motion is symbolic, and it alone will not change the material circumstances of our students. My hope is that this resolution will give leverage to those of us invested in this work to implement policies that do improve outcomes for Black students, Indigenous students, and all other students of color. So thank you.
Thank you, Marissa.
All set.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Sure. Bobby Tudeo, Middle Street, downtown Lowell. Calling to speak in support of motion 6.1 by school committee persons Connie Martin and Jackie Doherty. Want to applaud the leadership taken to not only name the problem, but to highlight its unique damaging effect on young people. While children do not have a say into the world they are born into, they are, however, greatly impacted by it. This motion boldly recognizes the health, safety, and educational impacts of racism on young minds. For that, I'm comforted knowing that my 2 young African-American sons will grow up in a school district that values them enough to do the necessary work to combat racism. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay. All right, that concludes the speakers. Who wants to go first? Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'd like to start by reminding us how proud we are to be part of Lowell and the great history that the city has, and especially the diversity of the city. And I know for me, I was very proud to put my children in the Lowell Public Schools and to look out over the faces of our students at Lowell High when they graduate. It's like the United Nations. And we're proud of the fact that 69 languages are spoken at Lowell High School. And I think that it's important for people to realize that when we heard from the voices from our community talking about their experiences with racism, that it's painful, it's uncomfortable to hear, because of course we don't think of ourselves as racist. And in this motion, the intention is not to claim that we are racist, but to acknowledge that racism exists, systemic racism exists, nationally and here locally. And acknowledging that systemic racism exists doesn't make you a racist. It makes you anti-racist. So by taking the stand tonight, we are saying we can do better as a community in lifting up all members, that we are proud of that diversity, we see our diversity as a strength, and we need to do a better job of lifting up all members. It's not about pointing fingers. It's about acknowledging that there's work to be done. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I certainly support the co-maker of the motion. Again, I think bringing this forward, it's really an effort to ensure that a larger conversation that is certainly happening in our nation does indeed have roots and have an impact here in Lowell. I think that for a community like Lowell, where we can lay claim to an amazing range of diversity around every corner, and certainly in our schools. We're a minority-majority district where more of our students are students of color, and I think we need to not only acknowledge that, but celebrate it. The thought process behind bringing this motion forward really was to ensure that as a committee, as a community, we recognize that there have been, I think, great strides made, particularly in this district, to address this issue, but that the work is not done, and that as a committee and again as a community, we're committed to moving forward in a positive way to again acknowledge what the issue is, but to more importantly work to eradicate it. I think that it is a huge issue, and as my colleague has said, it is uncomfortable, and it's difficult to talk about. And I think that the most important quality we can bring to this conversation is one of respect and one of recognizing that we all have things to learn, myself chief among them. So there is no, I have no qualms about saying I need to know more, I need to do more. This is a very small step, symbolic certainly, but I think, again, it is the hope of this motion, and I hope in moving forward that we'll be able to make some really dramatic strides in taking our district to a place where we can not only recognize what our issues are, but where we can celebrate the positive steps we've made and chart a course for more and more opportunities for all of our students, and particularly for our students of color, to ensure that everybody has a fair shot. I mean, and that's certainly what the goal of our educational system needs to be. I think that it is certainly, when we look at it in national terms, it is a huge issue, no question. But there's no national issue that doesn't have a local impact. And I know there are some who feel that this is beyond our ken, and I can appreciate that. But the reality is that there is no problem in history, and I'm stealing from Margaret Mead now, paraphrasing at least. But there's no problem in history that the solution wasn't found in its very beginnings by a small group of committed, thoughtful people who cared enough and were willing to work hard enough to find a solution. We are a small group of thoughtful and committed people, and I think that we have it within us to begin this fight, begin this process here for our city that we care and love so much, and I think that collectively we can have an impact here in our city that I hope will have resonance far beyond that. So I do ask for my colleagues and hope for their support as we move forward in this effort. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else want to speak? Mr. Dillon first.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know if my mic's on.
Yep, they
Yeah.
should be.
Thank you. I just, right now, I don't see any positive outcome from this motion. Making a declaration on a national issue, I don't think is beneficial to us right now. I think our only focus should be on the reopening of schools and making sure that every kid has an appropriate education starting in September. And I direct people to, if you think that this is just the start of something for this district or this city, I would point people to our strategic plan, number 1, which about half probably of our goals are dedicated to this topic. Our policy manual itself, and direct you to a letter from our superintendent titled Ongoing Efforts to Combat Racism. There's a lot of good information in there on what we are doing in order to make sure that every kid gets the same opportunity. So I'm going to vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Clark?
Thank you. I would like to commend my colleagues, Ms. Martin and Ms. Doherty, on bringing this motion forward. I very much support this. I think it's very important for our community at this time to move this forward. I think it does align very nicely with our strategic plan, as there is, clearly this is about eliminating the racial, ethnic, and linguistic achievement and opportunity gaps among all our students, which is one of our fundamental commitments, and also to leverage Lowell's rich diversity to access all the benefits of a truly global school system. And I think that this is very much in line with that, and I just want to thank you, and I will be supporting this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dakota?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to be speaking from the heart here as a lifelong educator, and having been an educator in this city for 25 years, and now on a school committee for the last 5. I have to say that Lowell, I am the proudest person on the planet to say that I am from a Lowellian. How we have been welcoming people, helping people, making sure that we go the extra mile. In our case, I think we go the extra 10 miles and 100 miles to help our kids. I think that a big portion of this motion should be stricken. I can only support this motion up until and outcomes of all students. I agree 100% with that part of the motion. The rest of it makes it sound like we are falling way short, and I disagree with that 100%. I think we're doing, is there more work to be done? Sure. Is it in our strategic plan? Of course it is. But to paint us in that kind of brush, I take exception to. I'm very upset, and I know there are going to be a lot of people that are going to call me a racist from this day forward. But I strongly argue with that point. If you think I am, you don't know me. I have never seen a person in for anything other than being a person. And I'm sorry, I do agree with the initial part of that motion, but I cannot abide by that second half, so I will not be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hoey?
Thank you, Mayor. I lost some sleep over this motion, to be honest with you. Friday, I get the packet delivered to my house. By the way, I love the way they send it in a white envelope every week, and I have time that I can go over it. So to me, that's a great way to be spreading the news to us. But the first agenda I got, there was 39 words in this motion. And the first 29, I never seen a motion so beautiful. And that's the way I was coming here tonight. Now, I had a problem with my little iBook here, whatever you call it, last night. It's back to normal thanks to the high-tech people around here. But then I looked at an agenda that I get tonight, and there's 83 words in the motion. See, so that's my problem tonight. It went from 39 words to 83 words. If you look at the first 29 words of their motion, I'd have no problem voting for this tonight. I'm hoping you have 4 votes tonight. I think you do. But I can't vote for it the way it's written. Now, if they said it, or if they could, maybe I could do this now. I'll try to make a substitute motion. I make a substitute motion that we just go with the top 29 words, and that is it. See if I get a second.
All right. So there's a second on the motion. You're saying that you want Up to what point?
The 29 words, put a period at the end of it, if, of all students.
First sentence, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, before especially. Leave that out, and I think the motion's perfect. I think the mayor gets what he wanted, and he deserves it. I appreciate you fighting for this, but that's just how I feel, especially tonight when there's so much more added to it. So,
Okay.
thank you.
Can I speak, or do we have to go to the motion on the floor first? Okay. Sure.
I just want to be clear, the motion as a whole was submitted as a whole on Friday. There was a mistake in the office where for some reason they just put the first sentence in. I didn't realize it until I reviewed the agenda over the weekend that the second sentence had been left off. So I had contacted the superintendent's office to have the full motion updated. So just to be clear, it was submitted as one piece and somehow it got separated, so.
Yeah. Okay. Sure, Mr. Howie?
I just want to just return that I spent a lot of time reading this motion, and up to where I say the same thing that my colleague Andy Dakota was saying is, right there, it's beautiful. The motion, there's nothing wrong with it. We're saying racism is a national public health crisis. I believe we have a lot of race around the country, around the world. But at the same time, I think we're going to show people on this school committee how much we're going to do when we go down the road and talk about a few more issues, meaning what are we going to do at the high school. When that comes up, I think people will see the true colors of the school committee, if they want change or are we going to change. So I don't want to get too deep into how I feel, other than the first 29 words in that motion, the substitute motion. I'd like to vote on that if we could.
Ms. Doherty?
Thank you, Your Honor. As the co-maker of the original motion, I'd like to express concern that the second part of that motion is where we talk about our commitment to change. It's one thing to say, yeah, it's a national crisis, but the second sentence talks about how we, and Mr. Dakota, I'll throw your words back at you. You said, could we do better? This is us saying, we're going to do better. That's what we're saying. And as I mentioned before, just being aware and acknowledging that systematic racism is a public health crisis nationally, wherever locale you want to give it, doesn't make you a racist. It makes you acknowledging that we can do better. So I am personally committed to the second sentence, that it says we can do better. We're going to work to do better. Not that we're racist, not that we don't want to have the diversity that we celebrate, but we can do better. So I think the second sentence is important. I don't know if, and so I don't know how you, Mary, you can tell Ms. Sheehan how we do this, but we had a motion that was seconded, that was on the floor first, and then we have a second motion that just, to me, takes the meat and the substance out of the motion. It just says, we declare it a national public health crisis. That's it. It doesn't say our commitment, which is fully in line with our strategic plan, is to do better. Our commitment is to do better. So how do we do that?
We have the substitute motion first. Mr. Howie and then Mr.
That was going to be my question, Mayor. I don't know everything about the rules of Robert's Rules of Government. I'm just thinking that we could vote on our substitute motion, and then if that fails, you go back and vote on the original one. That's what will happen tonight, that's all.
Okay.
So to me, I'm not saying that, I think it's perfect for you. That's what I do.
Okay.
I
Mr.
feel.
Dillon, you had a question?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I don't think it matters how it's worded or what's in there. There's no action, it's an empty motion, and I think it's grandstanding, to be honest with you. And so I'm still going to vote no. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right, why don't we do a roll call on the substitute motion, then I'll speak.
Ms. Clark?
So just
So
to
this is on the substitute.
This is on the substitute.
substitute motion? No.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Nope.
Ms. Doherty? Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
No.
Ms. Martin? 2 yeas, 5 nays, motion fails.
So my comments are that I thought the motion was worded very well. I think that it couldn't have been stated any better. The second part, I feel, shows what action we're going to take. And we talk about that we're going to take action. This just puts it in words. So we are taking action. The superintendent's been working on this all summer. This has been an issue all summer for all of us. And I think that the way the motion is worded, it's perfect. It's supposed to make us feel uncomfortable. It's supposed to make us feel, question ourselves, look at ourselves in the mirror. I think this is, if I was hoping tonight we could pass this unanimously. You got to look in the mirror. You got to feel uncomfortable. We're here to educate. What's the cutoff? When we get one student or we get 10 students come to us and they say they have an issue with this, what's the cutoff? Do we not help one student? Do we wait until it affects 10? Students have told us there's issues. My kids have told me there's issues. Parents have told me there's issues. This needs to pass. We need to go on this. Where we go from here, we declared it. It's a problem. We're going to work on it. And this is what we do. We educate. I would ask people to please reconsider. Let's do a roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
No.
Mr. Dillon?
No.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
No.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes?
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
4 yeas, 3 nay, motion passes.
Thank you. Reports of the superintendent, 7-1.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, if I could, just as a point of opportunity here, I don't tend to comment on motions, but if I could, I do think this is directly in line with the messages that we have given to our community. It is in line with with our fundamental commitments to equity, and it is directly in line with the requests and advocacy that I've heard from our staff and our students. I don't have a connection to the history of Lowell as the Llewellyn, but I'm now a resident of Lowell, and I believe charged with being the caretaker of our students. And I believe this motion here is well-intended to state and to assert that going forward, we're going to take every step possible to recognize the needs of all of our young people, close the opportunity gaps that have been plaguing our system and systems across the country to ensure that every child has an opportunity to achieve his or her greatest potential. Right now, within our community, many youngsters and many people are being afforded a considerable amount of opportunity. We see that greatness being achieved in all of you in front of us that have achieved greatness as products of our schools, but that greatness is not being afforded to all. And I think it's our responsibility to ensure that the greatness that is Lowell Public Schools is afforded to all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate that opportunity.
Thank you.
There's
Mayor, can I respond to that, please?
Sure, Mr. Hoey.
Mr. Superintendent, I really love having you here, and I think the staff you have here is incredible, and you're doing great things for Lowell. The one thing I want to add to that, the reason why I stopped at of all students, I can't say I ever walked in the shoes of people that faced racism, but I know I walked alongside of them. I lived in the housing projects. I've been through 12 different public schools in Lowell, and I can say this for sure. Racism doesn't just affect people of color. Even white children get affected by it. If you look at what some of our students had to go through at the Robinson School, you haven't been here, none of you have, for the past 20 years, the same thing with the Sullivan School. Racism affects all the children of all colors, and thank you very much for your input. That's what I love about you. You're not afraid to speak up. But at the same time, racism to me affects every children across the board. And I do want to say that I believe we have racism in every city across America. I just think Lowell is the best at it. We're real good, and I think our staff is top-notch. So thank you for the extra time, Mayor.
Thank you. When we get to this report, Mr. Superintendent, I guess we have 13 speakers. So again, the audio isn't good on this, so why don't we ask people to just speak for 2 minutes, people can't hear anyway, so I don't know what the best solution is. Does anybody have any ideas that, you got 13 speakers that people really can't hear? Should be better? Okay. So well, we can hear it, but they can't hear it at home, so.
Be better.
It'll be better, all right.
Okay, thank you. My name is Trish Williams. My address is 11 Fairmount Street in Nashua, New Hampshire. I'm an English teacher at Lowell High. Dr. Fauci called the return to schools this fall the Great Experiment. Mr. Mayor, Dr. Boyd, esteemed members of the school committee, I am here tonight asking you, please do not experiment with the health and safety of the students and families of Lowell. We all want to return to school as soon as possible, but it's time to face the hard truth. After years of neglect and underfunding, our buildings were barely safe for occupancy long before COVID-19. Dr. Boyd, you have said several times that your decision to reopen schools will be based on science and facts rather than politics, and I completely agree that now, more than ever, is a time for our society to consult, work with, and trust the experts. But here's the thing many people have overlooked. Lowell public school teachers are the experts about the conditions of our own classrooms and buildings where we spend 8 or more hours each day. We teachers are the experts on what our students need most because we are on the front lines with them, directly interacting with them. Teaching with them, learning with them, sharing stories, listening to their pain. We teachers know our kids, we know our families, and it is the duty of the teachers of Lowell to protect their health and well-being. Our concerns are valid. What motivates us is that we are terrified of the negative impact returning to unsafe schools will have on our children. But at this time, we feel disenfranchised and that teacher voices and concerns don't matter to the administration. There has been very little transparency around these issues, very little sense that there is even some sort of plan. So how can you ask the teachers of Lowell to agree to and put their faith in a system that actively ignores rodent dung piling up in old and unused heating ducts, filters that never get cleaned, mold, asbestos, teachers and students with headaches and unexplained illness, constant leaks, crumbling ceilings that get covered up without repair, only to fall down again a week later when it rains, and a constant deficit of even the most basic supplies. Traditionally, repairs have been little more than Band-Aids. I know several teachers whose windows were broken and the fix was to screw plywood over it, even if that left the teacher with no other options for fresh air. I had a window in my classroom that would not stay closed. The solution to that was to nail it shut. This is not because of laziness or lack of knowledge. It is simply because of a lack of funding, which unfortunately is finally catching up to districts all over the country, including Lowell. While it's true that many of the surrounding districts are choosing in-person options, everyone will agree that Lowell Public School District is in a unique position. Our students, almost 75% of whom are students of color, are also overwhelmingly living below the poverty line. These communities are not only more vulnerable to contracting the virus, but have limited access to healthcare resources and tend to live in closer conditions, such as multifamily homes. COVID-19 will spread like wildfire. How can you ask the teachers of Lowell, sworn to protect our students, to not speak out on behalf of an extremely vulnerable population with a deep-rooted history of inequality, marginalization, and oppression through public health care initiatives. We cannot guarantee that our students will be safe if we open before all buildings have been thoroughly inspected, updated, and vetted by a third party. We cannot guarantee that our students will be safe if we open before we have enough PPE, cleaning supplies, and sanitizing norms. We cannot guarantee that our students will be safe if we open before COVID-19 policies and protocols have been developed and staff appropriately trained. It seems like almost every year the LHS community suffers the untimely death of a classmate. As a whole, we are crushed, and each of us asks ourselves, what could I have done to prevent it? What could I have done differently? This single death matters so much to us, and yet you are proposing that we willingly invite students and teachers back into buildings whose safety is at best questionable during one of the biggest public health crises of our time. I'm sure everyone agrees that one death is too many. Please open for remote learning only as we begin the school year until a third party is able to certify that our buildings are safe for our children. Thank you.
Can I just add again that the buildings are being checked over by a third party. They're just not a third party that was agreed upon with the teachers union. So I want to be perfectly clear that there is a third party involved. For whatever reason, it just was not mutually agreed. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Jess Markey. My address is 2 Ireland Street, Hudson, New Hampshire, and I am a K-4 content literacy teacher at the McCall Elementary. Good evening, Superintendent Boyd, school committee members, parents, teachers, paraprofessionals, custodians, food service workers, and all those that help make whole schools the best. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I love what I do. I have been a teacher for 15, going on 16 years. I don't have a particularly unique story. Yes, my lovely mom has COPD and I have asthma, but man, do I want to get back to work. Even my own kids call my students mom's kids. They know how much my job means to me. I always tell them to find a job that makes their heart sing like teaching does for me. With that being said, it is horrific that a pandemic has highlighted our deficiencies at a school system, but here we are. We have a chance to either see it or stick our heads back in the sand. My first inclination is not to disclose the flaws, but rather defend the beauty of my school. I work with, hands down, the most inspiring humans I have ever met, all heart, creative, and reflective. As for my room, I love so many things about my room. I think I have the best view in the city, even if all the windows are fixed shut. Yes, there was a flood in my room years ago, and they never replaced the rug and just cleaned it, but better believe I have the cutest area rugs in all the land. On a serious note, the lungs of our school are sick. We have a failing ventilation system, and we have for a very long time. And by no means do I think our custodial staff has a part in this. They literally make magic happen every year. I saw a meme stating that teachers can't Pinterest their way out of the pandemic, and well, frankly, we can't this time. It pains me to say that because I think we are all pretty resourceful. Yes, I take allergy meds every time I enter my building because if I don't, I need my inhaler. Yes, I use diffusers to cover or mask the smell that happens from no windows and faulty air. In the past, I have been willing to turn a blind eye because I love what I do. However, this year has been life-altering, and business as usual just doesn't feel right. This moment feels like I need to take a stand. I wrote the Matisse quote, "There are always flowers for those that want to see them," on a colleague's inspiration wall in her classroom last year. Seriously, she has a room that feels like a warm, cozy hug all year. And I keep thinking about it. Her room won't feel like that this year, not even close. She has to take out all of the things that make her room feel like home. In-person teaching will be sterile and disjointed, and we will still do it with our whole heart. But please help us feel like you care about our safety too. Despite these Herculean obstacles, we can still find the flowers. This is an opportunity. It is a chance to heal our schools, to fix them, and give them the checkup they so deserve, while simultaneously becoming better at our craft remotely. And don't get me started on remote learning. Remote is not okay either. It's not easy, and Zoom is exhausting. I don't want remote learning forever, just saying that my heart aches. But we need remote learning at this time, just long enough to fix the issues, so a third party can verify that our HVAC systems are safe. My friends and colleagues know I'm not someone who likes to rock the boat. In fact, I was nervous just typing this up. But this time the boat is already sinking, and we just need life vests and a new boat before we sink with it. Let's find the flowers together, shall we? Let's band together. Let's pivot. Let's be flexible. Let's be humble. Let's help each other. And let's get through this because we are stronger together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Tricia Papathan, and my address is 237 Oakland Ave, Methuen, Mass., and I am a teacher at Bermoudi. First, I'd like to say thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of my students and colleagues. I have grave concerns about the safety of our buildings and the claims that the problems will be corrected within the next 4 weeks. To give you some background on why I lack all confidence in these promises, here are some of the issues the school department has dealt with in just our building recently. Last fall, one of our first grade classrooms had a hole in the floor through to the boiler room below. That first grade class was squished into the library for 6 weeks while they repaired the hole. 6 weeks to fix one issue in one classroom. On the second floor, outside of the third grade classrooms, one of the student sinks was broken for 2 full years before anyone came to repair it last year. For 2 years, the over 100 students on the second floor had only one sink to wash their hands in. Otherwise, they had to go down 2 floors to the bathrooms. Imagine that scenario in our current circumstance. We waited 2 years to get one sink repaired. And in my own classroom this past January, a glass panel on one of the doors broke. The piece of cardboard that was taped up to cover the jagged glass was still taped there this morning when I was in my classroom, clearing out tables, bookcases, and other furniture to make room for socially distanced desks. 8 months of a broken glass panel with no repairs in sight. And I won't even get into the fact that one of the classrooms was closed off today because there's a bat in there. Given all of this, you can understand why I have so little faith that the numerous issues in all our buildings that need to be repaired or updated in the next 4 weeks will be resolved. It's simply not possible, and it's not safe or fair to send my students and colleagues back into buildings that have been unhealthy for years in normal circumstances, let alone in the midst of a public health crisis. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Anna Vaturin, and I live at 38 Florida Street in Lowell. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Superintendent, and members of the school committee. My name is Anna Vaturin, and I'm a math teacher at Lowell High School. I'm about to enter my 6th year of teaching, and I continue to question the city's ability to maintain our buildings and keep us safe. Year after year, all of us at the high school have continued to deal with facilities issues that have not improved. If the city could not maintain our buildings and hear our concerns prior to this pandemic, how can I put my faith in them that I will be kept safe now? For years, we have struggled with a lack of heat and air conditioning at the high school. We have been told to simply move our classes for the day if our room is not warm enough. There have been days where I got to work and my classroom was barely above 58 degrees. Despite expressing concerns multiple times, the heating issue at the high school has never truly been fixed. How can I guarantee that the city will keep our buildings safe during a pandemic if they can't even keep us warm during the winter? Throughout the past 5 years, there have been multiple times that the high school has run out of paper. How can a school just run out of paper? This is one of the most essential tools for teaching, and we can just run out. This is not an occurrence that happens just once or twice. We are talking multiple times a year for at least the past 5 years that I have taught in this district. Teachers are told to just improvise. We are always told to adapt, and we always do. But what happens if we run out of masks? Will we be told to improvise and adapt? Will the school turn a blind eye on our safety? Will I be forced to spend my own paycheck to supply myself and my 160 students with masks? What happens if we run out of hand sanitizer or wipes? There continues to be limits for these items at grocery stores. Will I need to buy them myself? How will I buy enough with these limits in place? The school cannot even keep up with simple requests for imperative materials like paper. How do I trust with complete confidence that I will have all the PPE I need to keep myself and my students safe during this time? As all members of the community continue to evaluate health concerns, I ask the committee why speakers cannot come to the school committee meetings and speak in person. Why are the information sessions for the community being held through Zoom? In fact, there is an information session with our head of school on Friday, August 21st. This is being held remotely through Zoom. According to our return to school plan, doesn't our high school have spaces big enough to accommodate for social distancing? If parents want to send their kids back to school, why aren't these information sessions being held in person? It seems hypocritical that I am being asked to return to work in full every day, but yet I cannot express my concerns about this in person at City Hall. In almost all other areas of employment, the leadership team strives to keep their employees satisfied and content at their place of work. Why is public education different? More specifically, at the high school, we continue to deal with an incredibly low staff morale. I ask the members of the school committee to ponder why this may be. How come our sector of business does not take pride in keeping employees happy? How come our teachers were never asked by administration about their preferences in returning to school? Why are we not being listened to, and why are we not listening to teachers' opinions when they are the ones who are in the building every single day? Why does my leadership team not seem to care about my safety? I am urging the school committee to use my anecdotes to see what life has been like as a Lowell Public Schools teacher. So often, I wish that the people who are making the decisions about what happens in our schools could just walk a day in our shoes. Please hear us and listen to our concerns. We deal with facilities issues on a daily basis, and it is insulting when we do not feel heard. It is imperative that our buildings be evaluated by a third party that is not affiliated with the city. Don't you feel as though this could be a conflict of interest if a city inspects its own buildings? We need to be ensured that we will be safe at work by someone who is not affiliated with city politics. Show us that you care about our health and our families by taking the time to make updates to our buildings. Other districts are doing it. Worcester is prioritizing $15 million to upgrade their HVAC systems. Why won't our school district do that for us? When did we start prioritizing money over the lives of our staff and students? As evident from my speech, myself and others have many questions about what the return will look like and how we will be kept safe. I look forward to hearing answers from the committee tonight and urge you to respond to these specific questions. How can I guarantee that the city will keep our buildings safe during a pandemic if they cannot even keep us warm during the winter? How will you ensure that we will not run out of PPE when we frequently run out of essential teaching supplies? Why won't... Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, hang on one moment, please. Sorry, I need to switch rooms. Hi, my name is Heather Green. I live at 48 Barrington Street in Lowell, Massachusetts. I am a teacher. I am the mother of an incoming kindergartner. I have been working in the district for approximately 15 years. To the superintendent, the mayor, and the honorable school committee members, I am calling regarding the issue 7.2 on tonight's agenda. I've been paying a great deal of attention to the plan for reopening schools this fall, to the point that my 5-year-old, an incoming kindergartner, now asks if we're going to watch, in her words, the school meeting after dinner each night. There is nothing I want more than to return to my classroom and students. To return from a maternity leave after schools had already closed in the spring was heartbreaking, as I never got to see my students in person again as their teacher. To start a year like this with so much uncertainty is equally frustrating. I have taught in the same classroom for nearly 15 years. Approximately 7 years ago, I began to notice that in the spring and fall, in school, I would suddenly get a stuffy nose and begin to hear my voice echoing in my head as though I were speaking underwater as I was teaching. This would usually happen in the afternoon after I'd been in the classroom for several hours. Co-teachers in my room commented that my voice changed as well, and they could hear the trouble I was having and noticed that I was having trouble listening to students and hearing their responses. I brushed this off as it always went away, and at the time I didn't realize the connection to the classroom. I realized it was my classroom when I went away for the weekend with a fellow teacher for a planning weekend. As we'd left school in one car, I was having all of the same allergy symptoms. After 45 minutes of driving with the air conditioning on, my breathing and voice cleared completely, and just as suddenly as it had started several hours previously, to the point that we both commented on it and began to run through when had I had these symptoms before. I've never experienced these symptoms in my home, my car, or outside. This only occurs in my classroom, most often after lunch in the spring and fall. If I can take my prep in a different building, or a different room in the building, the symptoms go away, but not as rapidly as they do when I leave the building at the end of the day. I've started taking allergy medication in the spring and fall to alleviate this problem that only occurs in my classroom. I say all of this knowing that my classroom does not have the visible leaks that other rooms in my building have. It does not have the visibly stained ceiling tiles. I've never had the ceiling of my classroom collapse from accumulated water while I've been teaching, which happened to a colleague in my building. My classroom has not flooded and then fully dried after frozen pipes in the winter, as had happened down the hall on at least 2 occasions. I do have 2 windows in my room that open, but even without all of those circumstances that have occurred in my building, my classroom still does not have adequate ventilation to ensure that the occupants of the room do not have to sit in a room with allergens in the air. I cannot imagine that a ventilation system that allows mold spores and other allergens to get through will effectively stop aerosolized viral particles from reaching the students and adults in the classroom. And I very much encourage the school committee and the city council to agree with the UTL on a mutually agreed upon third party to come in and inspect the ventilation systems. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, yes. Let me mute my students. Thank you. Hi, my name is Colleen Farley. I live at 248 Douglas Road in Lowell, and I appreciate the opportunity tonight. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, committee members, and Dr. Boyd. Thank you for letting me speak tonight. I am proud to be a tutor at the Riley School. I love working with the students and helping them learn, and I know I'm not alone in those feelings. The staff at the Riley are some of the most dedicated, caring, and compassionate people I know. These teachers would do anything for their students. This past spring, they jumped into action, handing out lunches, delivering bags of books, distributing devices, and learning how to teach on new platforms. They took time from their own families to connect with and check on their students. This was not unique to our school. It was replicated in every school across the city. Teachers don't complain when things get tough. They just do what they always do. They purchase supplies, plan, prep, and smile as they welcome students with open arms. Then they get to work providing the love and safety that can only be felt with a teacher. Due to the pandemic this year, things will be different. What is not different is that every teacher wants their students to be happy and safe. The problem right now is teachers themselves cannot provide the safety. Our students deserve good air quality. Buying more supplies, smiling, and working hard won't fix this. No matter how much professional development or Pinterest projects a teacher has completed, it won't fix this problem. Teachers can't make the virus go away, and teachers can't fix our ventilation systems. Teachers need you. Students need you. They need you to agree to a third party to evaluate and to fix the ventilation systems in our schools. When teachers tell you the ventilation systems aren't good, please listen. They often spend more time in their classrooms than in their own homes. As a tutor, I have worked in almost every classroom in our building, and I can tell you that there is a wide range of heat, cool, odors, funny smells, windows that do and don't open. The ventilation systems need to be evaluated and fixed. Again, this is replicated across the city. Teachers have been making face masks, buying shields, and working on engaging lessons for in-person or remote. Teachers can't fix the air quality in their rooms, but you can. A friend recently asked me from another district how often our air is circulated in our school. I couldn't answer. Can you? At her children's school, the air is recirculated 12 times per hour. Another friend asked if our air purifiers are UL listed and if our systems are MERV 13. I couldn't answer those questions. I hope that you can. Teachers want to be in school with their students, but only when it's safe. Teachers want to prepare rooms, welcome kids, and get back to teaching. Nothing will be the same this year, but you can help make it be safe. In an earlier motion tonight, you talked about systemic racism. Many of our most vulnerable students will be the ones first heading back to school. It is our job to keep them safe. We should not be expecting them to go back into buildings with poor air quality. This is not fair, equitable, nor safe. This would never be accepted in other communities. Please agree to a third-party independent evaluation so that teachers can get back to helping their students learn in a healthy and safe environment. Thank you. Sure. My name is Gail Thursby, and I live at 118 Park Road in Chelmsford. I'm calling in regards to Agenda Item 7.2. I want to share my concerns about my crowded therapy office in the basement near the boiler room of the greenhouse school. The room has no windows or sink, and it's shared with 4 other adults, all of whom travel between schools. As a speech therapist, most of my students are seen in small groups in the office, and when my students and my colleagues' students are in the same room, social distancing would be impossible, even with proper ventilation, which I doubt the small room has.
The social worker using the room before me used a portable air purifier. She suggested I continue to use it. I tried, but the machine was so loud and it interfered with speech lessons. Since then, I've twice asked my principal if I could move to a room with a window. I was told there was no other room available, but that air quality tests had been requested. Staff will soon be returning to buildings for professional development. I don't know where I'll be expected to work from, but I hope it's not room 109. On page 7 of the facility analysis, there's notes listing schoolrooms that shouldn't be used. Many schools and their rooms are listed, but I don't see any information for the greenhouse. Some other schools are also not listed. Oops. According to what I've read from public sources, Centerville, where the greenhouse is, has the highest rate of positive COVID testing. As a speech therapist who works with high-need students on IEPs, most of the young students who are placed in substantially separate classrooms will be candidates for in-person learning. And those entering kindergarten will come from the immediate Centerville area. I need assurance that it's safe. Staff are being asked to trust the City of Lowell to conduct air quality safety tests. This is challenging, given my history of misplaced trust. For example, along with other SPED staff, I requested student restraint training because some of my students bolt or bite and they could harm themselves or others. The request was denied. I requested a transfer to an open SLP position within the city a few years back, but Human Resources hired someone from the outside, breaking the contract to do so. The SLPs as a group have asked for additional therapists given our extremely high caseload numbers. A fellow SLP more than once has spoken before the school committee about this, and I myself have spoken with the superintendent, SED administration, and my principal about the inequity of services delivered to my students in comparison to students from other districts. There have been no SLP positions added despite great need. Please consider using an independent agency to conduct air quality testing. Superintendent Boyd has spoken of his elderly mother, a former teacher, having multiple health concerns, and how he and his siblings would have insisted that her health be safeguarded were she still teaching. My 3 adult children feel the same about me. I'd like to close with a personal story. When I was 12, my dad was diagnosed with pleural mesothelioma, a type of lung cancer caused by asbestos elements in the air. He was a non-smoker, and he was 40 when he died. Being young, I never really knew what my dad did at work. But on my birth certificate, it says he was a chemical worker. He worked for the W.R. Grace Company. A while back, there was a book and a movie called A Civil Action, starring John Travolta, that featured my dad's company and its possible relationship to serious health problems and deaths due to chemical exposure. My dad was a single parent and my custodial parent. When he died, there was only myself and my grandmother at home. She raised me with the help of Social Security. She'd never learned to drive, and until I learned at 16 and a half, we were dependent on others for transportation. My grandmother was an immigrant, and although she could speak English, it was difficult for her to read and write it, complicating our access and the guidance she could provide. Sure, I'll wrap it up, sure. I imagine that many of our families in Lowell would experience similar hardships if their head of household were to suffer ill health or a fatality from COVID-19. Please do all you can to support my health and the health of our community through thorough, high-quality air testing conducted by well-qualified professionals. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, hi, my name is Katie Irvine, and I live in Bedford, New Hampshire, but I teach in Lowell. I teach 6th grade at the Pine, and I just wanted to talk about two main points. One's an issue of pedagogy, and one's an issue of equity. So the pedagogy issue is first, I want to express my appreciation for everybody who worked so hard to do this report about the building quality, but I think that us as adults, we have to be held to standards that are as high, if not higher, than the standards we hold our students to. And one of the sign that I held today at the rally said basically that our 6th graders are able to tell the difference between biased information and unbiased information. That's one of the standards we expect from them. And I work in a school, I'm very lucky, where I have a supportive administration and a building that I'm pretty sure would pass an inspection by September 17th. At least I think. It's not my area of expertise, but people I've known and taught with and trusted for years, as far back as college, are telling me that there's no way their buildings will be safe. So I don't know who I am to believe, and you probably think that, I mean, not you, but plenty of people probably think that they are giving biased reports, right? So back to pedagogy, like I said, in 6th grade, whenever we make our students write any argument, they have to take exactly what we were talking about into account. In 6th grade, the standard is W61B. Students have to be able to support claims with clear reasons and relevant evidence using credible sources demonstrating an understanding of the topic or the text. So I talk with my 6th graders about bias. I don't let my 6th graders use information from biased sources, and the standard gets stricter as they get older in upper middle school and onto high school. So I truly believe that if we expect 6th graders to make arguments with unbiased, credible, reliable sources, that we as adults need to do that too. And so I really truly think that while I appreciate the work going into this report, the data provided is not reliable, unbiased, and credible. The anecdotes I hear from my friends, even though I truly believe them because I have that relationship with them, that's not technically reliable, unbiased, and credible either by that definition. The only way to get data that's reliable, unbiased, and truly credible is with an evaluation from an unaffiliated third party with no stake in the matter. That is how you get unbiased, credible information. So I truly believe that while, again, a lot of hard work went into this, we need that unaffiliated third-party information. And again, coming from someone who, my building's probably in fine shape. The second thing I want to bring up is an equity issue because, as I mentioned, my building is in fine shape. Equity is such a thing that's been discussed in great detail across our district from the top down, all different roles, and I appreciate that, but I think the safety of our buildings is an equity issue that's not being addressed. I can go to my building, and my students' biggest complaint is my classroom gets to like 86 degrees, sometimes higher, but they know that it's a safe place to be. Across the town, kids are dealing with 100 degrees almost, and I don't understand why in the same school district, kids in my classroom, they can complain about the heat because the blowers are blowing, but it's still 86, but there's children across town that are trying to learn with almost 100 degrees. There's ceilings literally falling in, rodent droppings, leaks leading to mold, and I just can't see why that is equitable situation. And if I wanted, I could crawl under a rock as a teacher, even because my school's in good shape, and I could say, well, my classroom's fine, I can deal with it being hot. I have one window that isn't open, but my others do, so let's get back. But I'm in a union, and it's not my job to just worry about myself. It's my job to worry about all the teachers and students in this district, and I don't think that other children in this district should be learning in those conditions, pandemic or not. And again, reiterating, an independent third-party evaluation is truly necessary to determine what needs to be done to bring schools up to an acceptable, safe standard with or without a pandemic, because otherwise these issues will continue. And it seems like I have extra time, so the thing I was going to say, if I had extra time, I know people are worried about jobs for custodians if we, say, started remote to get the buildings in shape, but I think that if we started remote to get the buildings in shape, that would be a great opportunity to keep custodians employed because they could be hopefully helping to get some of these repairs done to make, again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina Degree, 305 Nesmith Street, Lowell, Mass. 01852. Okay, so I'm calling, I'm speaking on topic 7.2. I have concerns. I have a kindergartner. My granddaughter's in kindergarten this year. My oldest grandson is in the 8th grade. And my concern is I wanted to know what protocols or provisions are being put in place for children that come to school. And, from my past experience with my grandson, there has been very lax supervision with children at school. Unfortunately, I hate to state that, but it's the truth. When they come to school and they refuse to wear a mask, you're also putting teachers in a very, compromising position when they can't enforce that a child wears a mask. But if a child comes to school and says they're refusing to wear a mask, then what do you guys do? You're putting other kids in danger as well. But, we're also seeing numbers spiking again with this with the COVID-19, and we're still trying to open up public schools. As far as like kindergarten, like I said, my granddaughter's in kindergarten. You have kids that are going to be like, "Oh, I like your mask. Let me try that on." "Oh, I like your mask. Let me try that on." As it is, there's not enough teachers in place, as far as for the classroom to function. I noticed that there's been a need for a lot of substitutes in the past. So my concern are the issues that I stated, like kids coming to school and refusing to wear a mask, and also kids, trading masks or using each other's masks. How are we going to stop the spread of this virus, not just from the children, but also from the teachers? Again, you're putting teachers in compromising positions because they can't enforce that a child wears a mask, especially, when we're talking about 7th and 8th graders that are very rebellious at times. And if they come to school and they just feel like they don't want to wear a mask, they don't put it on their face, you're also putting teachers in jeopardy as well. So that's pretty much what I have to say.
All right, thanks so much. Hey, everyone, this is Marissa Sheehan, 7th grade science teacher at the Daily. I feel at a loss for what to say right now, and I'm calling in anyway. I've been very direct with this committee about the inevitable and fatal consequences of forcing us into unsafe buildings, and I have yet to hear from any of you about your justification for creating such a dangerous situation. So instead, I'll just take a moment to thank the UTL Executive Board for everything they're doing right now. for listening to their members and for standing with us. I agree with their position that we need a safe working environment for students and for staff. I mean, this is basic. This is Union 101. We want a safe working environment. And I stand with the union and I support whatever the executive board ultimately decides to do during negotiations. On this building assessment, I opened it and I didn't read it, and I didn't read it because I didn't really feel like wasting my time, and it sounds harsh, but this assessment was conducted by the city. It's the same city who has neglected the upkeep of our building for over 20 years. The landlord that, despite your calls, never seems to fix the heat, never deals with the infestations, it ignores the fact that your roof is leaking. So last year, a very large piece of the ceiling fell directly onto a student's desk, and the story in the halls that day was that the ceiling fell, but at least the student who normally sits there was absent that day, and it didn't fall on them. Water was pouring out of the ceiling, and it wasn't dripping or trickling. Pouring is really the most accurate word to describe the amount of water. It was an amount of water that should not be inside of a building. It was an amount of water that caused something akin to fear in the custodian's eyes as they frantically tried to address the situation. And the smell came next, and it was that I've never smelled before, but it was the smell of something unmistakably alive. Maybe some kind of mold, I don't know, and we actually never found out, but it immediately gave me a headache. This was the most concerning thing for me about this whole situation, and there are many other stories of our increasingly decrepit buildings, and I'll let other teachers share those stories with you. So, no, this assessment coming from the city doesn't mean anything to us. It doesn't assure us that the city government or the school committee has genuine concerns for our health. And we will return to school when the buildings have been certified as safe and certified by a third-party, mutually agreed-upon assessment agency. Then and only then. And I just have a final thought, which is this. You know, tonight this committee formally asserts that racism is a crisis that affects our students. And you said that to affirm your commitment to addressing racism in all its forms in our schools, it would be required ongoing, immediate, and long-term responses. Before you right now, you have your first opportunity to take said immediate responses to addressing racism. And we open our school buildings, which families do you think are going to get sick? Like I said previously, it's easy to say that we care about racism, but what about when it means having to make hard decisions like breaking from your colleague's majority opinion? When it means standing alone or being alienated by other white people that you have relationships with? So this is where the real anti-racist work begins. And to be fair, not opening schools will also disproportionately affect poor folks and folks of color, and actually anyone else who relies on school for child care. But one is an economic harm, and the other is a health harm with much more acute consequences. And Dr. Boyd, you've made the argument that parents should have choice, so that students with higher needs can attend school and have their needs met, and this will increase equity. And I've been thinking about this since you talked about this, and I decided that I don't agree. And I agree that parents should be engaged and have choices that increase equity, but because we're in a pandemic, one family's choices are not felt by them alone. One family choosing to send their kids to school has ripple effects that can harm the larger community. And while I agree that they should have the right to choose, I don't think their right to choose outweighs community safety. Maybe we can dive deeper into this conversation. I know that parents, at least one, has suggested that you call me, but alas, no call yet. So, I'll end by saying that opening schools will have disproportionate health impacts on our students and folks of color in Lowell, and that is structural racism. And so my question for you is, are you for this, or, well, not for this, but are you okay with letting this happen or not? And I'll listen to the comments offline.
Thank you. My name is Caitlin Kohlberg, and my address is 158 Concord Road in Billerica. Good evening. My name is Caitlin Kohlberg, and I'm proud to be a 5th grade teacher at the Daly Middle School. I'm calling in to speak tonight because of my concern for my safety, as well as the safety of my family, my students, and my community if we return to teaching in physical school buildings this fall. Because of the inadequate maintenance of our school buildings in Lowell, we have particular cause for concern that our health will be at risk if we return to in-person instruction. My classroom routinely reaches temperatures above 90 degrees in the fall and spring. Knowing that I, as an adult, will be extremely uncomfortable keeping a mask on for prolonged periods in this kind of heat, I can't imagine how difficult it will be for my 10-year-old students to do so. I am lucky, compared to many of my colleagues, to have 4 windows that open in my classroom. However, 3 out of the 4 in the room only open a couple inches. Considering the pronouncements from public health officials that good air circulation is one of the most effective ways of reducing transmission of COVID-19, I am extremely concerned about the risk to me and my students if we are to return to the classroom this fall. I am afraid to bring COVID-19 home to my boyfriend, who is at a high risk of contracting severe illness due to his health preconditions. As a teacher with only a few years of service in the district, I'm worried that I won't be given the option to stay home, seeing as the district is currently planning on putting students into as many classrooms as possible. I'm also worried for the health of our staff, students, families, and Lowell community. According to a study released by the CDC on August 14th, Black children are 5 times more likely than their white peers to be hospitalized with COVID-19, and Latino children are 8 times more likely than their white, non-Hispanic peers to be hospitalized with COVID-19. Additionally, it's widely acknowledged that communities of color experience disproportionate rates of hospitalization and death due to COVID-19. In the interest of equity, we must consider how a return to school is likely to impact the most vulnerable in our community. I hear the argument that being out of school is harming our young people. Teaching is my passion, and I believe wholeheartedly in the power of in-person learning to empower students, maximize their learning, build their social competencies, and provide much-needed social emotional support. Clearly, it is beneficial to our students to go to school in person. However, nearly all of the benefits of being in school buildings are negated by the dangers of this pandemic. Our young people are resilient. They will make up for the lost learning time and the lost social connection. But imagine the impact it will have on a young person who endures the loss of their teacher, their parent, their friend, their neighbor, or their uncle to COVID-19, when that loss may have been completely preventable if only we had delayed the opening of schools. This is the type of loss that our kids will not bounce back from. They will understand when the premature reopening of schools has a hand in the loss of beloved family and community members, and they will not forgive us for allowing that to happen. Even worse, they may struggle to let go of their own role in spreading the illness to loved ones, though it will not be their fault. Are you willing to ask children to carry this emotional burden? The crux of the matter is that if teachers and students return to school buildings that are not safe, learning will not be their focus. How can we be expected to focus on teaching and learning when we are constantly vigilant, trying to protect ourselves and each other from this virus because we are afraid for our health and the well-being of our families? How can we be expected to put teaching and learning first when a return to the normalcy that our students crave is impossible? A return to the classroom will instead be an isolating, frightening experience in which students are taught that if they make a small mistake, they could be causing someone to contract a severe illness or perhaps even die. This is why I am urging the City of Lowell to have all school buildings inspected by an independent expert mutually agreed upon by the City and the United Teachers of Lowell. Until a mutually agreed upon independent expert certifies the safety of our buildings, returning to school buildings remains an incredibly frightening prospect for many of our staff. You have the power to prevent COVID-19 deaths in our community. Put staff first by protecting our lives and those of our loved ones. Put students first by protecting their lives and those of their loved ones. Please don't ask us to return to school buildings until we have evidence that it's safe. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Desmond. All right, Mr. Superintendent, do you want to jump to the facilities report first, you were saying?
Whatever is the pleasure of the committee. These speakers that you heard were actually speaking to 7.2, which is the facilities analysis. What we have on the screen is 7.1, the school reopening update. We can proceed in order, 7.1.2, or if the committee would prefer to move to the facilities analysis.
I think the facilities, because the hour is getting late.
I do too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we switch the presentation to the facilities analysis? Is that what you're doing, Robin? Thank you. Once we get this on the screen, Dr. Hall will share an update on our facilities.
Good evening, members. First of all, I would like to thank the public and the speakers for pointing out issues. We've been stressing all along at facilities, if you see something that's wrong, report it up the chain immediately, and we report it to the city. But please don't sit on information. If you see something that needs to be corrected, report it to Mr. Underwood or Mr. St. Cyr, the custodians, and we'll act to get that to the city right away. The committee has before you a 5-page letter or a 4-page letter from the city on improvements that they've made or have planned. And I would like to point out there is a third-party consultant that's looking at these buildings and working with the city. And from my review of this, if another person came in and assessed it, they'd be looking at what are your high-risk areas and how can you improve them. But this committee and the facilities department and the city has already acted to do that. Just last week, as some speakers expressed concern, were there going to be enough masks? Were there going to be enough gloves? Were there going to be enough gel? This committee already ordered an abundance of PPE and sanitizer and permissions to enter last week. There are other concerns about masks. Those were ordered. And these engineers, they would theoretically say this area is one of your high-risk areas, this is not your high-risk area. I'd like all these speakers to know we've identified or are aiming to identify the 10 to 15 best classrooms in each particular building that have windows working, and that we're bringing in air purifiers, which the city has stated in their letter, bring up the ventilation systems to level 13, which is what they were advised by the third party to do, and they did purchase that to the cost of $400,000, which this committee was going to initially purchase. The city recommended better purifiers, which has been told those will get you up to the highest level that you should have. Again, our goal is to provide choices to families. We're only aiming to bring in 25% right now, where we feel the staffing capacity is, to give our highest risk children an opportunity. And that's what the city has been assisting us with, and we've been focusing on those classrooms to achieve those goals. There were some speakers, too, that expressed safety concerns. We do have a process in place where if you're high risk or you have a family member that's high risk, you can apply for a remote learning position and provide medical justification to substantiate that. So there are protections in place for that as well. So I'd encourage people to actually read this data that we have before you, and we continue to update. Again, we're only using 10 to 15 classrooms of approximately 12 to 15 kids per classroom, with a teacher and a paraprofessional theoretically assisting. Over the next week, there are going to be some staffing models released. And again, teachers out there, if you have a high-risk situation or a family member, you're freely able to submit that in for HR to review that and apply for a remote learning position. So again, I would say that this committee has charged us with creating a safe environment to educate about 20% of the occupancy for each school, and those are going to be devoted to kids that really do need to get back into school. And that's our aim, to provide safety and education. And I have no doubt that if this committee doesn't think it's going to work out, or the superintendent doesn't think it's going to work out, we won't have in-person school. But please, again, if you see something that you need to get fixed, tell us, and we'll immediately relay it to the city. They've been very responsive. You can see in this letter that's before the committee as well, the engineer that was hired by the city said focus on getting outdoor air in. That's why we've been working with the city. This is on page 2, to have exterior classrooms that have windows that can open to provide ventilation. Additionally, you'll see that 480 filters are analyzed by the city and are scheduled to be changed out. And on page 2, the air purifiers for $400,000, 10,000 of them, some of which are already here, will bring you up to MERV 13 in those classrooms that will be opened. You can see too on page 3 that there's a schedule for cleaning the HVAC components, and there are already ongoing roof and boiler projects in a multitude of schools that the city is focusing on. If I could bring you to this facilities analysis chart, we promise that we continue to try to provide ongoing detail. As you know, we started at the lowest possible level to bring in those limited number of children safely, and as conditions change, we plan to update this on a weekly basis for you. We've tried to update this as best we could with the PPE and purifiers and the other stuff that the committee approved last week. So you can see on here we're monitoring hand sanitizers, soap, spray bottles, and as one of the speakers pointed out, will we have enough PPE? That's what we're trying to schedule. If the superintendent doesn't feel as though there are enough supplies on hand, he's not going to allow the school to operate in person. Additionally, signs are scheduled to go up in the schools for the arrival of children. There was acrylic sheets authorized by the committee so we can set up PPE barriers and shields for the clerks. And again, you can see down here as well that there's going to be gowns, face shields, masks available at all schools to last up to 3 months. And one of the, I think Dr. Boyd said earlier that the commitment was to provide you and the public truthful information. So we do have the public health stats that we're constantly updating on this. What's not on this afternoon, which came out, and again, this is the commitment to give you all the information, we're still green, but we went from 2.24 at the time that we published this to today at 4 o'clock it went to 2.9, but it's still green, which means there's no reason why in-person schools shouldn't operate in the community. And the percent positivity rate went up slightly as well from the time of publishing. At 4 o'clock today, it came out at 1.34 instead of 1.18, which it was at the time of this chart. Again, on this chart, too, I think is very informative for the public as well, and I'd ask everyone to look at it. We do put out what the capacity was last year for each particular school, and then we show what number of seats we're currently projecting to be available in consideration of staffing, in consideration of how many foggers we have, in consideration of public health data, and then we're projecting what we believe now we safely can bring into the schools with social distancing, and again, with only utilizing the classrooms that have working windows that aren't interior classrooms. So you can see a lot of these elementary schools, we're only listing 100 or 120 students that we feel that we can safely bring students and staff in for. Some of the middle schools are up to 180 right now. But you can see, if you look above several rolls of the 2019-2020 enrollment, they're at around 20 to 25% of where we were operating last year. So from looking at all the literature, these engineers that would come in, again, would say, what can you do to make your building safer? Which are your high-risk areas? What can you do to improve? I think that we're leaps and bounds ahead of those communities that are getting those assessments, because a month to 2 months ago, we were already looking at this, and with the committee's guidance, we were only using rooms that had windows and DXing the interior rooms, not to use them, to again only use 10 to 15 rooms in each building to just get to the children that really do need to get to school at this point. And perhaps things will change and things will get better, and then we can bring more children back then when more staff do not feel they're at high risk, or family members, and things will improve. Again, we are getting reports. You know, if you see something wrong, or you think something's wrong in your school, please report it. The city's asking for information constantly. We're updating reports from principals and rooms that they're not using, so teachers and family members and the committee and the city will know what rooms we're focusing on and not focusing on. And again, the point of this is to alleviate many of the fears that some of the callers had, that, you know, there were problems this year with this, or problems in the past. We're attempting to not use the rooms that will have any problems, and using the safest rooms in each building, and cutting down the number of people in building to provide the safest environment for just these limited amount of children that have a particular need to get back to school quicker than other students. There was some talk on what processes we would take, or the committee would take, in regards to whether or not we had to shut down a building because we didn't have enough PPE, or we didn't think the room dimensions were safe enough, or for a number of other reasons. I just wanted to provide this last slide just to provide the public with how the process would develop. First of all, we're getting input and recommendations all the time from principals, from community members, from parents, and we're processing that information. We would then go through a collection of data process where we would ask staff members and employees what they thought, and quantify everything and propose solutions or things that we can correct. We would then staff it amongst the division or department chairs, and then talk amongst the chiefs about possible solutions. But before the committee would be presented a recommendation by the superintendent, at that meeting, it would certainly be posted, so there'd be an opportunity for public input and process. And, you know, certainly the committee would make the final decision on this, and, you know, not all the time is the committee going to agree with the superintendent or staff. Certainly, we certainly could expect that the committee would provide different guidance, or ask for further information, or try something else to better achieve the objectives of the community, and, you know, as the school committee deems fit. So this last slide is to let you know, or the public know, what sort of analysis goes into it, and that the committee will make the final decision on these sort of issues. So with that, I'm open to questions, if the committee has any questions, or...
Mr. Howie? Yeah, I guess I could start the conversation here, because this is a very big issue to me, facilities. Where do I want to begin here? I'll start with this. If you remember, I know you do, just a few years ago, in front of Manager Murphy, he took the blunt of it. We came in front of that man and told him, hey, you're not maintaining your schools, your nurses, we don't have enough of them. Your SRO officers, we didn't have enough of them. We threw it all in his face, and lands and building also. And now you look at what we've done in this school department, and our staff sitting in front of us. You did more than you ever could dream of. When this is all said and done, you're going to see how great of a job you did, and the people from Lowell are going to see that. I look at this in a different way than a lot of years. I am a contractor, I know quite a bit about contracting. But we came in and we pointed right at Manager Murphy. And we pointed, I know I did, and I pointed right at Lands and Buildings. And I yelled at both of them, and Manager Murphy got up, he got awful upset. And that was the beginning of talking about maintenance in Lowell. We might be ahead of most of the country, to be honest with you. But after we did that to him, and now all this time goes by, right now I look, I says, you know, I can't point the finger at Eileen Donahue anymore. I can't look at the city managers and say it's your fault. I can't look at Lands and Buildings and say it's your fault. This is my opinion and my opinion only. What I feel right now is if I was going to point the finger at anybody, I'd be pointing it at your city council. And the reason being is, if we ever seen the Collins report come up in front of this school committee, you can bet they told us to hire roughly, I don't have it in front of me, I didn't want to write things down because I want people to understand that it's coming from me. They told the city manager and they told the city council to hire about 22 people, HVAC, plumbers, electricians, and they didn't follow that report at all, okay? They focused on, you know, Crash Alley, I call it, Lord's Overpass, the courthouse, all those things. They got some important, the jam plan, they got so many things on their plate that they forgot about schools. That's what they forgot about. The city council forgot about the schools. The real problem is they don't want to raise taxes. They're afraid to raise taxes. I don't blame them. You can't win in most cities if you're going to raise taxes. And they also aren't focusing on their schools like they should be. Right now they are. Why? Because we had the virus, the pandemic it took to kick them in the rear end and get them moving on our schools. It's not on us. And I feel like we're being criticized and yelled at. I think the first time in my life, Mr. Superintendent and Jim Hall and your staff, all your staff, have worked great with the city manager to get us into a pretty safe spot. But then everything that come down from the state, what do we got to do? We got to get to 25%. But I know this school committee, I'm so happy they started right off saying, we don't want no layoffs. We don't want no teachers laid off. We don't want no parents laid off. And we want to go back to school. And I think most of us know we're not going to get a whole bunch of kids back into school, but we want the kids that need it real bad. I know it's 7-0 there. We don't have to worry about that vote. And hopefully my colleagues add more to this tonight, but that's who I'm pointing the finger at this time, the city council. You know, they can say they're doing a bunch of things. All I've seen them do is fight about Zoom, fight about you, the mayor, and who should have been the mayor. This is early on. And I told you before, I think you're going to find out that your best part of you is going to be in your schools. And we got to just turn the city council around and look at what's going on here. We got to get these schools up. I don't know if we're going to ever get it much better this year, because without all those pros, and I know what they are, HVAC, I know nothing about doing it other than putting a filter in an air condition. But if you don't filter an air condition over time, they're going to break down. It's like your car not breathing right. So a lot of those places weren't seeing filters for a long time, so it breaks your machines down. And right now they're stalling, because I read this report, and Mr. Hall, I want to thank you because I know this come up quick. But this one line in the third paragraph said, and this has a lot to do with the daily school to me. They had a bunch of fans on top of that school, and I do pay attention to a lot of it. I hope I can convey this message to you, Mayor, but they had almost every one of their fans were gone, the exhaust fans. So I see this in this thing, it says, the remaining 50% of the fans that have been evaluated and the parts have been ordered or will be ordered this week. See, those things about ordering a fan, coming up soon, to me, it's a stall tactic. That's the way I've been taking it for the past couple of years. And now if you're going to go looking for fan parts, it's a tough time when everybody across the country is looking for the same thing. They failed. The city council, to me, has failed. They should be the ones with 200 to 300 people standing in front of them. This school committee should be getting phone calls and the staff about how great of a job we have done. So I can't point the finger anymore at this city manager like I did to Kevin Murphy. And I feel bad for Kevin Murphy because he actually shouldn't have been the one that took the blunt of us not maintaining our schools over 100 years. But I think I've said enough tonight, but at the same time, I think you did a great job there, Mr. Superintendent, and your staff trying to get as many children in our schools as possible. I know that's an issue that's still going on with DESE, that we haven't heard that yet. You know why they said we're fully remote, when all of us know that's not the way we were looking at it. We're looking at it, you're going to get choices. Even our staff, we're not trying to force no one in. I got diabetes, and I don't mind coming in. I'm going to risk. Without risk, you don't get any reward. Thank you very much.
Yeah. No, I'm
Thought
good.
you were ready to go.
Before we get going on this, we have the facilities report we just went through and the school reopening update. So it appears to me we're doing a fully remote opening. So are we going to call that or not? We're trying to get the most, just let me finish. We're trying to get the most vulnerable kids back in the classroom, right? We're trying to get the special needs classes, the kids that are homeless maybe, the kids that really need to be in a classroom. That's what it looks like to me. We've been going over this week after week. It looks like we're 70% remote, and just kids that are most vulnerable that can't learn at home because of physical reasons or just don't have internet or they don't have a computer or something. So does that sum it up where we are, Mr. Superintendent?
Well, I think that's some of, you're certainly speaking to the enrollment priorities. Translating the building capacity into actual classroom and program spaces for families to choose is some of what Dr. Guillory will take you through. That's what our principals are working on right now. We're at 25% capacity because of, as Dr. Hall shared, that's the maximum capacity right now that we can offer out safely because safety is our top priority. The windows, only using rooms with windows, looking at the 6 foot instead of 3 foot, there were a lot of exceptions that DESE allowed that this committee rejected because it would not allow us to maximize safety. Some communities you may see, Mr. Mayor, that are using 3 feet of distance versus 6 feet of distance. You may see some communities utilizing rooms that don't have windows. We've said we're only using rooms that have windows. So our maximum capacity right now, based on the safety criteria, is the 25%. We're allowing then families to choose into those seats based on a weighted enrollment lottery, as you stated, Mr. Mayor, that heavily weights the highest need youngsters based on the policy that this committee approved several weeks back. But translating, Mr. Mayor, from building capacity into how many kindergarten seats, how many sub-separate special education seats, that's the work that our principals are undergoing right now. And that's part of what Dr. Guillory's presentation to take you through what that process looks like.
But it just seems like we're not getting any buy-in from the teachers. So if teachers don't want to go back in the buildings and we're going to do remote learning 75%, how do you get 25, how do you fairly and equitably get 25% of kids in that don't have any physical or, how do you do that? So basically it sounds like we're doing remote with special need kids that need to come back in, like the 80-day school. We need to find a space for that school. And if out of those 55 students that want to come back, then they need to come back in and be educated for the year. So I'm getting a little frustrated. We're going week after week, we going over this, and it doesn't seem like we're going anywhere. I want to support what we're doing here, but there's no support from the teaching staff. And, we're a month out from opening, and we're still in the same spot we were 3 weeks ago. So I'm just getting a little aggravated. Ms. Doherty and then Mr. Dillon.
Thank you, Anna. I can appreciate your frustration. I share that with you. We are running out of time. I believe that Dr. Hall and Dr. Boyd have been working to negotiate with our unions around coming into the schools. And as we heard from the speakers tonight, there's still a lot of I don't know if the word's misinformation or lacking information, for speakers to talk about their health concerns. We've discussed repeatedly that if you have a health issue, you provide documentation, you will be given the remote option. But people still don't seem to know that. And my understanding is an email was sent out today, but weren't we talking about this all along for weeks? So why don't our staff know that if you have a prevailing health condition, you will not be asked to come into the buildings? The issue of an outside vendor now, Dr. Hall, this report was brought to us today. Is there a chance that this could be on the website so that our staff can read this? Or, because this wasn't in the packet that was on the website. It was.
Right, we just got this afternoon.
So can we put that on the website? And you mentioned the outside vendor, the outside consultant, Garcia, Galuska, and D'Souza Consulting Engineers. We are using somebody outside the city. Those of us who've been involved, I've been on the school committee for 12 years, Ms. Martin, I don't know what your number is, Mr. Hoey, we know the city has a history of not maintaining, Mr. Dakota, you lived it at the high school. We know that. So we have a credibility issue with our staff. So we need to overcome these things. But, Your Honor, I don't see how we can serve those 25% students, which is about 3,500, I don't know exactly the number, ballpark, if we don't have people willing to come into our buildings, if we don't have the adults.
what I
So how
understand.
do we move the adults? We have to inform them what we're doing to make sure
Nobody
they're
wants to
safe.
listen. We've been showing them this report. They can read it all they want. They want a third-party
Well, we have this
evaluator
consultant.
that they decide, and they're not going to listen to anything else. So it's
Well,
getting
what
frustrating.
do you think the answer then is to go fully remote? What do we do with those high-needs kids?
Where are we with negotiating with UTL on that? How are we working together to educate the most
Vulnerable.
impacted students? Where are we with that discussion?
So we're continuing to collaborate with UTL. I want to hesitate that we're not overstepping the norms of our bargaining and bargaining in public. We're having productive conversations, productive dialogue. And that's in an ongoing way. There's Dr. Hall, if you could, I want to defer to Dr. Hall, who's our lead negotiator and is a labor attorney, before I overstep bounds and say, can you share more details about that?
Let me just go to Mr. Dillon first. He's been waiting.
Yeah, I might be able to help. Nobody else wants to say it, but if the staff have questions about all this stuff and all this misinformation, I would direct them immediately to their union president. If they have questions about this, that's where they need to go. The union is negotiating all kinds of stuff just like this. And the reason why there's so little information coming from this staff is because everything's being held up by a third-party company coming in. We've already been doing this. We have air purifiers. We have windows being fixed. We have a private third party. I don't know why they don't listen to what's going on here. We did it a month before they were even arguing about it. Custodians have foggers. Hand washing stations will be everywhere. Hand sanitizing stations, masks, gowns, gloves. The air purifiers alone are going to make those buildings safer and have better air in them than they have for recent memory in the last 20 years. We've gone above and beyond. In fact, we've bent over for the teachers and the staff to make these buildings safe. All the way down to we're only going to have 25% capacity. We have the parents going nuts, the staff going nuts. Direct your questions to the union president. He's the only one that can get us past this. Because I think this third-party evaluation crap, you're telling me, you obviously haven't watched any of these meetings, because you're telling me that this committee doesn't care about maintenance of our schools. I campaigned on it. I was speaking at meetings before I was even in this position. I'm going to be all over maintenance, and we already have been. And the administration's taking care of it. We bring up equity. We can put equity into anything that we talk about, apparently. Well, I don't think it's very equitable that our teachers don't want to show up to teach the most disadvantaged kids in the city. Talk about equity. What kind of equity is there in an online education? When a kid's sitting at home in a building that is much worse off than our schools are right now. Anybody ever been in some of the worst houses in the city? I have. I don't want to have you can't find a place that do remote learning in half the places that some of our kids live. Talk about equity. Ask the union president if you have any questions. This is not on us. We're fighting for maintenance every step of the way, and go protest the city council meeting. Thank you.
And I agree with you. I mean, we're having all these special meetings. We should just have a special meeting this week with the union president in these chambers and hash this out. I mean, we're way beyond the point of opening schools. So, Ms. Clark?
Thank you. I do want to thank everyone who has been working so hard. I mean, I don't think anyone in this room has really had much of a summer, as I know many of our folks who have been really working to figure out how to do this as best as we can. I want to thank our teachers and our families. I mean, clearly, everyone cares and has strong feelings about what should be done, but there is no perfect solution here. And I agree with some of what's been said tonight to say, you know, there are a lot of questions that still need to be answered, and we understand that teachers and families are also anxious because so much is unknown. And we're hearing you, we're reading your emails, we're listening to your voicemails, even if I can say for myself, I'm not responding, but I am reading. Our teachers union came out very early on and said that they want to stay remote. And many of our families are saying they want to send their children back to school. So right away we have a conflict. And we're trying to work through the conflict. Everyone in this room has been working all summer long. I mean, since March to figure out how to do this right. That being said, I think we do need to work together. I completely agree. I think we are at the 11th hour, and we really do need, there's still so much to do, so much to be answered, but a lot isn't answered because of this kind of delay, and it isn't for anyone in this room, in my opinion, that has been holding things up. I know Dr. Hall has been working tirelessly to get us to a place where people will feel comfortable returning. I can understand, I'm not from Lowell, but I understand that trust has been broken here with the city for many, many years because cries for help have gone unanswered. And I would say it has taken a pandemic for them to pay attention and to spring into action. I think this report shows that. I think that the work that the team has been doing to put a process in place to figure out what our real building capacity can be and to not just be, trying to push people and cram people back into buildings, which is something, we could have done. That could have been presented to us. We could have gone with Desi's suggestion of 3 feet as opposed to the 6. But no, that is not something we were willing to do. So I also agree there is so much misinformation out there. I want to commend one of our speakers from last week who spoke again tonight, Monica, who has really gone above and beyond in clarifying and putting solid information, doing the research, and putting it out there for readers, people to read. But the truth is, if I wasn't sitting in this chair, I wouldn't have read all of this, but I've been reading all the way through, and the truth is, things have been progressing. We have made a lot of strides, and really at this point, it's about coming to the table and being willing to meet people where they need to be. We've got families who need students in classrooms. We all agree that that is important. We're not trying to put every student back in a classroom. We're trying to put a subsection of our students back in classrooms. We need teachers to be there to teach for them. We need paraprofessionals to be there to assist. I ask that people who are listening would, seek out information. Read what's out there. It's so much to read, but I really recommend that you read it. Ask questions, because spreading the misinformation is just creating and kind of exacerbating this issue. The fear, the frustration, the irritation. Attend the info sessions. There's info sessions that have been held by our administration. There's going to be information sessions that I know that the district, that schools are holding in terms for staff, in terms of reopening, where there's going to be opportunity. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but about speaking with and hearing from principals, building specific. Attend those meetings. Ask your questions. Look at the website. There is so much information on our website. And you have to do the work. I'm sorry. We're the force feeding. We're giving as much as I think we possibly can. The reason we don't have a plan that looks like some of the other ones in the state is because we are in a place there are still decisions to be made because we are still negotiating this. And the other thing that I would like to ask is that as much as possible to continue to be kind and understanding and compassionate, because I have seen some nastiness coming out in emails, in Facebook groups. Again, I understand there's a ton of frustration out there. I am also frustrated as a parent, as a school committee member, as a member of this community. I mean, this is happening around the world. We are not unique. But anyways, I think that we still have a responsibility to be respectful of one another, to be understanding, and to really be working in the best interest of everyone involved. And looking at our students and knowing that some of our students really do need that in-person instruction. So, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dillon?
Yeah, just want to thank Jim Hall, unbelievable job, and everybody in the administration. Most that's been done maintenance-wise in a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I could add, this is not the only community struggling with these decisions. These decisions are a struggle nationwide, and this position of our particular union is a public position of the statewide unions. I'm not aware of any local communities that have come to agreement with their unions around in-person instruction at this point. I do feel confident in the steps we're taking. We're progressing. Dr. Guillory's prepared to share with you how we're meeting the next benchmark. We just welcome back our principals. Our principals are getting prepared to have students back. They're feeling confident in their ability to plan. Obviously, they don't feel as confident as if they had all of the certainty, but they're planning with the assumptions that they have to make. Now, to build off of what has been shared, 8% of our young people identify as homeless. I would put forward a question. How does a young person learn at home if they have no home? Nearly 20% of our young people have special needs. Many of that population have multiple disabilities. They require the support and services of multiple adults. The very issue that we talk about the Addie Day School, and we had a parent who spoke pretty passionately about the needs of his youngster. The reason we have challenges with that particular building is because the young people there are served by multiple adults. If that's the level of service, how can we ask a family to somehow meet that need remotely? And then we start to move just through the needs of learning how to read for a kindergartner if we are in a place where we are one of the lowest infection rates in the entire Commonwealth. Now, I don't know how long that's going to persist. We had this conversation here when we talked about the calendar. We don't know. We have committed, and we have stated quite publicly, we will close down this district immediately if we cross the threshold. This is not a battle of whether we have school if the infection rate is increasing. This is a question about what we do right now within the moment of time we have available to us to serve our families using the strictest guidelines that we can possibly adopt. I know, I've heard from community members, Superintendent, how can you possibly only open schools to 25%? Well, the reason is because we've adopted the strictest guidelines here to make sure that in every case our families are safe. That's why only 25%. I've heard from others that say, well, even one student in school then compromises the well-being of the community. I will tell you, if you are an individual who's not leaving your home, you do not need to leave your home to come to school either. You have the option for your child to remain at home, and as an adult, we have put out there for all of our staff, if you are compromised or someone in your household is compromised. But I will also tell you, with the steps we are taking, any facility, including this one that we are sitting in right now, will not meet the safety guidelines that our schools are going to meet. If you're going to lunch at Tremonte, it is not meeting the safety guidelines that our schools are going to meet. I was at Market Basket the other day with people hounding down my neck. There was no social distancing there. Now, it's a big difference with schools, and I want to share that, which is why you see the staffing criteria here, because we've moved down our class sizes based on 6 feet, very small numbers. I was just at our high school this morning working through their master scheduling that we're going to be able to share out with you, which Dr. Guillory will share how we're moving through this. 500 students on campus, on a campus that always has more than 3,000 students on campus because we're also taking into consideration the overall population size. Because yes, there are these what ifs. What if in terms of quarantine, in terms of exposure? We're going to follow all of those. And I have to say, there is nothing about any of these decisions that are easy. I've gotten messages suggesting that I somehow have blood on my hands for making these decisions. That's a quote. Right? Nobody is attempting to make decisions that's going to do harm to anyone. These are extremely difficult decisions that we are doing and making collaboratively. Teachers, parents, principals on all of these task forces to get us to a place where we can start to consider these options for our kids. When we see data coming out, as we did with high schools opening, you see our populations go down so we can learn from those data points. We're going to continue to reflect. School opening is on the 17th. However, as you rightfully have noted, time is running short because our principals are in now. They need to plan for our teachers that are coming back on the 31st, and then our teachers will plan for our students. And this world may change around us, and we're ready for that. We're prepared for that possibility. It happened in Lawrence. It happened in Lynn. I just talked with the superintendent in Lynn, and guess what? He's full remote, and he does not have agreement with his bargaining unit. The very same conversation about an external outside evaluator of his buildings, he's wrestling with that exact same conversation. I called the superintendent in Somerville. They did an external evaluation of their buildings. I have that note. Dr. Hall has reached out to that very organization. He shared with you what that framework looks like. That's what that evaluation looks like. It's a 4-point process where you go through all of these things. Now, we are taking every possible step, and I also have to say, the conversations have been collaborative during the course of negotiations. We are meeting, it feels like almost daily at this point. We did discuss today, we're making strides, but I can't suggest to you that there's an agreement because there simply is not one. But we're taking steps, we're moving in that direction. I don't think that public bargaining is going to be a help in that process. I don't know that that's going to be the step that I would suggest, but certainly whatever the committee so chooses. Now, Dr. Guillory can share with you, we are prepared to share with you next week how these building capacity translates into actual seats for our families. And I do know, in community, I understand 25% is not enough. We've got to do this safely, but I reject the notion that somehow remote learning is the new normal. There is nothing normal about remote learning. It is where we are right now. We're going to do the very best we can with remote learning, but that is not in any way going to replicate what we can provide in person, which is why we've been very clear to say our goal is to approximate with remote learning. And as a family, if that's the choice you're making, or if we don't have space to serve your kids safely, we will make it the very best that we can. I will also tell you this, I talk to teachers all of the time, regularly. And the teachers that I talk to are not necessarily telling me that they're not interested in coming back to serve our students. So I think there's mixed messages also coming across from all different parties. Our charge, my charge, as I understand it, number one is to be a caretaker for our young people, to make the hard decisions and provide those recommendations to you. I'm prepared to do that if I have to. Right now, every data point we have suggests that in-person learning is still a possibility for our kids. Not all of them. This is the most that I think I can recommend safely, and it's not good enough. Community, I understand that, but safety has to be our top priority. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got a quick question about the third-party issue. From what I understand, DESE has a list of approved third-party companies. Is the company that the city is...
I don't think so. I think the manager went out and did this on her own or whatever. They picked somebody like a month ago. So they were trying to be ahead of the game, and, you know, it just doesn't seem good enough. But, you know, the manager's doing a heck of a job right now. The guys are up on the roof in 80 and 90-degree weather. We've been meeting weekly. Everybody's working their tail off, like we said. No summer vacation, and it just is very frustrating when it's not good enough. Everybody's been busting their hump.
But you do realize there's history here. You
Oh,
do know
I
that.
understand the history, but we
Okay.
have a new manager, we have new school
No,
committee
I understand
here, we have
that,
new-
but does that bad taste still in the
Oh, I
in
know.
their mouths, and you know that.
Yep, oh, I understand.
It's hard to look past that.
No, I know, it is. All right, why don't we're gonna come up to the 10 o'clock rule. Do we want to go through the school opening plan?
I want to do really quickly, if I could, I'll have Dr. Guillory just really quickly skip to how does building capacity translate into seats, and what's really important for you is to get to the 1/12 budget, because we've got to get stability for our schools in terms of staffing in order to even get to school opening. So if that's okay with the committee, we'll expedite the presentation. This is about, Dr. Guillory, the timeline, so they can see where they are in the process, and then really quickly into how we translate seats.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So where we are in the reopening process is step one was to submit a preliminary plan to DESE by July 31st. That has occurred, of course. Step two was to, by August 14th, submit the comprehensive reopening plan, and we've done that. We are now in step three, where we've welcomed our administrators back this week to begin the deeper conversations about how to support and plan for a safe school reopening. So I will advance to the metric, or slide 6, in your presentation that talks about the process by which we are looking at how to convert how do we convert our bill schedules based on those the capacity maximums at 25%. So our school leaders have been briefed on this and are working to propose schedules that would allow 25% of their capacities to exist in the building. So to give you an idea of some of the items that are being considered, classroom sizes, we know that that varies by school. All of the work that the facilities departments have put into the number of schools to determine those capacities. And once those capacities are then determined, then we're looking at the prioritized list that you all have already seen around who comes in first. Sub-separate students, our L students, McKinney-Vento, and the likes. That then is translated into, as well as our L students, that's then translated into the prioritized grades. So looking at our entry points for elementary, the K2 seats, the 5th grade seats for middle school, and then the 9th grade seats for the high school or the secondary schools. And so looking at those, or working through these examples, principals are then working to determine how many available seats are open at the various levels that they may be able to afford there. So this is the process that we're undertaking. Then the Teaching and Learning Office will meet with the principals, discuss those plans, and then start stepping toward processes of approval, communicating this information with our Family Resource Center so that they know how many seats are available in the various schools, or spaces are available in the various schools, as well as then determining the amount of staff or the number of staff that are needed to support our in-person seats, as well as then the staff that then have to support our remote learners. So that's in essence a very quick overview of the thinking that's going into supporting our schools and building out those schedules.
And a lot of credit to our principals. They came back to school this week. All of the frustration that all of you have experienced, they too have experienced. They came back ready to work. They've hit the ground working to get us to the next step, and they're doing yeoman's work. All of our leadership is in the schools. Our central office is back. We're charging ahead to the next step, getting ready for our teachers that return next. We'll have seats available, knowledge of what those seats are next week. I shall be getting to you very quickly the Lowell High School plan As I think I've mentioned before, that's a rather complex plan. We have a forum set up for Lowell High School families on Friday. I'll have to the committee prior to that what we're looking at in terms of program seats at Lowell High School. I met with that team earlier today, just doing incredible work, and watching that team gel with a new head of school during these times. I think you find ways to put a smile on your face as superintendent when you see that happening. Puts a smile on my face. So thank you, committee. Thank you, Dr. Guillory. I don't know if there's questions or we should progress directly to Ms. Turner. This conversation is essential for our principals to be able to do their work. This is the 1/12 budget that solidifies their staffing models.
Any questions on the report? I did see that you met at the Riley this week in the courtyard. That was a good idea.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so no questions on the facilities report, no questions on the school reopening report? All right, Mr. Howie, and then we got to do the personnel report.
Just a quick question to the superintendent. Professional development, how's that going to go? Is it going to go, they can, all virtual, or are they coming into schools?
We're going to be discussing that with our principals actually tomorrow. Mr. Hoey, if you would give me the privilege of being able to share that with our principals first, then I'll share it with you after.
Yeah, it's just a question that a lot of teachers have been asking me by the phone,
It's
you know?
very true, and I think also what Ms. Clark said, we just put out to our teachers that we're going to be doing. We did community forums, family forums. We're going to have faculty forums next week where they'll be able to hear from me and then break out with their principals and hear about what this is going to look like in their schools as well ahead of them returning on the 31st.
All right, Ms. Doherty?
Thank you. Two quick things. You mentioned community forums. I did have a parent reach out to me. I believe the Spanish language one was supposed to be yesterday, and she said there was a problem with it.
We've done 2 of them. I will have to tell you with varying degrees of success with our interpreters. So
Okay.
I did get some feedback on one of our interpreters. We've done them with the Spanish language. We'll do them in every language that we hear there's
Okay.
a desire.
I did get a message that there was a problem with yesterday, so, and
I'm losing track of days. Was
So-
that yesterday, Dr.
Tuesday.
Guillory, Ms. Desmond, when we had the interpreter challenge? It was last.
maybe it was less. It was a difficult message to understand, but one of the Spanish language was. And then, in terms of the reopening update, have we made a decision about the learning management system? Have people been able to test drive it? Where are we with that?
Ms. Desmond?
We're still in the process. We had leaders return this week, and so they we're doing test drives of, teacher accounts, student accounts, looking at the proposals, and that's all leaders, so principals, assistant principals, coordinators, et cetera. So we are continuing the conversation tomorrow, and as far as the decision, I don't know.
Based on that feedback, we may bring it to you for a decision in terms of a procurement decision or perhaps not. Ms. Desmond's reviewing it. She got feedback from principals today. She's continuing through the process. It will be accelerated, as we said. It's not going to be the same type of vetting as you're typically used to with a curriculum and a textbook, but we're trying to make sure that we can at least get the feedback and input that would be necessary for you in order to consider a decision.
Well, it is millions of dollars, obviously, so we'd like to get buy-in from the stakeholders who are going to be using it. It's just, we're running out of time. That's concerned. Thank you.
Ms. Martin?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. So as we're kind of making our plans to move forward, just in terms of planning for ourselves, I think obviously we're looking at having another meeting, scheduling a special meeting for next week. I would encourage us to get that out and on the books as soon as possible. So even within this week, rather than waiting till a Friday or a Monday, so I think that would be helpful. I can only speak for myself, and I would encourage my colleagues to share their concerns. The biggest things in front of us that I think we need to make some decisions on next week are certainly the learning management system. I know that's a very short turnaround time, but we're going to need to make that decision very quickly. So I am hoping we will be at least close to some final recommendations by next Wednesday. And again, I say this as one member, so you can take that for what it's worth. The second thing is I think we're going to need to see in writing what this proposed professional development structure is going to be. I think, I'm sure we're all hearing concerns about, in-person, remote, I think we need to, we've talked already about how we want to honor teachers who have, health concerns and all that. That needs to be taken into account even for the professional development. And there is a compelling argument for teaching about remote learning, using remote learning. So there's something to be said for that. I think thirdly, this question that I think the mayor and I think we've all been kind of moving around is this 25%. I appreciate that the principals and Dr. Guillory and Ms. Desmond are working on this and that the principals are just back. I think taking this time is important, and I think that's fine. But I think on Wednesday, next Wednesday, we're going to need to start making some final decisions. I don't say this like it's news to any of the administration. I know you're all fighting the same fight that we are, but we are dangerously close. And we need to make some final decisions and be able to talk about them publicly so that everybody is aware of exactly what these decisions are, and they can make their plans accordingly. Again, this, it's not like I just came up with this idea. We've all been talking about it for a while. But I just think we need to have a hard deadline of, this ostensibly next Wednesday, if that's what the polling kind of tells us is the best night for us to have it. Those are the things I'm looking to have some final decisions on. Again, to my colleagues, I would say if there are specific things we want to be able to share tonight saying, we want to see some final information on this so we can make a decision next week, I would certainly encourage people to add to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dakota.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with you, Ms. Martin, but I think the entire staff needs to have the professional development in remote teaching, because that day could happen that regardless of how much we're trying to get kids into the buildings, if we end up having to close down, all of our teachers are going to have to be teaching remotely. So I think the professional development has to be extended to the entire staff. Thank you.
When we discuss this next week too, in the case that we go remote learning because of a shutdown, how will this is a new year too, so is part of the discussion accountability for students and teachers, right, staff, to make sure that everyone's accountable for their job, right? So that must be part of the conversation, I would imagine.
Yeah, again, without getting too far into it, I think, yes, there is, and all of those things, Ms. Martin, absolutely. I think those are the decision points you'll see come to you. And again, I'm looking forward to sharing with you, and we'll share with you very shortly what the Lowell High School plan is. They're going to go live with the conversation with communities on Friday. We'll get that out to you tomorrow. You won't have a chance to act on that specifically before it gets to the Zoom, but you'll then act on it with the others of what these actual seats will look like next week. And then I do want to make sure I can get to Ms. Turner's. We need that from you, committee, the guidance on this, and there's only 5 minutes, so.
All right, so we need a motion to accept reports 7-1 to 7-3 by Mr. Hoey, seconded by Mr. Dillon. New business adoption of 1/12 budget for September. Ms. Turner.
Thank you, and you'll hear from Ms. Turner why this is so critical right now.
Okay, so the presentation is showing where the money's coming from and where it's going. So the first slide is the strategic use of the FY20 savings. We had over $8 million in savings due to unused substitutes, transportation, salary savings, and this lists out what we did with each of it. I won't go into detail and read them, but just so you know, we replenished revolving accounts, we bought Chromebook carts, we pre-purchased supplies, pre-purchased technology, and we reversed charges to grants, or not reversed, but we delayed charges to grants so that we could use up the local budget rather than leave any money on the table. The next slide is an excerpt from Munis, and it's showing you that we did not leave a dime on the table, not one penny. We spent 100% of the $8 million savings. The next slide is a summary of what we had predicted for Revolving accounts, if you can remember, in 18-19, we were negative 0.3% in our revolving accounts. They were depleted. We started to go up in 2019. The goal for 2020 is we wanted to have at least 2% of the total budget back into the revolving accounts. We projected 2.3% because we were doing well prior to the pandemic. I'm happy to say we went up to 4.5%, so we doubled our savings. Well, it's a revolving account, but I'm calling it savings. The next slide is showing you a summary of FY21 funding sources. It's just showing you everywhere we are receiving funds from. Mr. Hoey was referring to, grants that he had heard in the past. So this slide right here will show you a summary of all the federal funding sources, including the title grants, the SPED grants, and all the COVID grants. And then it shows you the SPED funding, such as Chapter 70. Overall, the increase looks like it's $12 million in increases, but as you know, grants are restrictive. If we have a $100,000 increase in a grant, we're restricted to use it for the specific purpose of that grant. Another example is the COVID CVRF grant. We got a $3.2 million grant, but that's restricted for PP&E and COVID-related costs.
I just interrupt. We're going to accept the same number that we have been accepting, right?
Yes.
All right, so why don't we accept the thing, and then you can go through the report.
Actually,
if we go through past 10 o'clock.
There's,
it's the same number.
Right.
There's an important shift here from what you approved before. We are moving back to the spring allocation to schools because the staffing constraints are a challenge in order for us to allow in person. We need to stabilize our schools. Our recommendation is that we move to the full $2 million increase to school budgets that we talked about in the spring. That's a shift. That's a difference. And this economic cliff is real, the crisis that we're facing. So, Mr. Mayor, I wanted Ms. Turner to be able to share that because we need to stabilize our schools. I've got to start to phase out our hiring freeze for reopening. If we have a teacher vacancy, I've got to open that up, whereas some others we don't. Dr. Hall is going to be managing that hiring freeze a little differently rather than district-wide. So, Mr. Mayor, I just don't want to get confusion. If you approve the number, I want you to know fully what that is.
Well, it's the same number as the last 2 months, right? And then next month, we're going to have a new budget in the next month coming through the state and city, I would believe, right? Yep. Okay. So.
Do you want me to continue? I'll go to do.
All right, well, I need a motion to go past 10 o'clock. If it fails, then we're out. So I need a motion by Ms. Doherty, second by Ms. Martin, to go past 10 o'clock. Roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
Ms. Doherty?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? 7 yeas approved.
All right, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I was going to say no. Please continue then.
Okay, so the next slide, this slide right here is a budget summary, and it's just reminding you that if we have level funded FY21 costs, all of our contractually required salary increases, the health insurance increase, the fair student funding, the original amount that we had proposed was $2,074,000. We had to, adjust that periodically due to the different scenarios we were working on. We're happy to say that that was a priority, so we replenished that when we did get the additional Chapter 70. So all of the fair student funding plans that the schools had in the spring are being honored at this time unless anything happens. But the COVID grants are all listed there. The COVID expenses, and then the next section shows you where the anticipated revenue is going to come from. The Chapter 70 reflects the $3 million increase. We're assuming the level funded city cash, so that is still not certain, so that could change at any given moment. And then it shows the ESSER CARES Act, the school reopening grant, and the state tech grant. I'm happy to say that the grant that Ms. Desmond wrote was approved for $1.7 million for the state tech COVID grant. So overall, even with all of these revenue sources, we would have been short $980,000, but we have $980,000 with fringe and central office cuts. The next slide is just a crosswalk. I won't read it. I just want to point out that what I tried to do so that you could keep track of all these changes that are happening, I put an A, and it would show you the Federal CARES Act. It shows an A, and it would show you where the Federal CARES Act is covering health insurance. So in the budget itself, in the budget document, you could look in a column and you'd see A, B, C. So if you wanted to be reminded on how many, what the central office positions are that were being reduced, you would be able to look through and see all the Ds in that column, and it would show you exactly where in the budget you can find it. So this is just serving as a crosswalk for your, for your convenience. The next slide is just notes trying to tell you that we need to stabilize and finalize school budgets, which we already did with the $2 million. We're moving from a full hiring freeze to a phased reopening of job postings. We're slowing the, the full opening of the hiring freeze. That way we can, keep some control in case the state does change the revenue figures. There is no additional information from the state since the last time we brought it to you. It is still uncertain as to the level of cash funded from the city, despite the state's commitment for 3 months. We can only appropriate the amount approved by the city despite the state changes. As the mayor just said, we're going to ask you to approve 14.9 despite the state's change in revenue. And that's because the city already approved that amount, and we will be they'll balance it out next month. We'll get the full amount of the overall approved budget. And unless there are legislative changes, September will be the final month for our 1/12 budget. The law does say there's only 3 months that we can do. And the next slide is saying it's the recommendation. Despite the increased financial need in September and the increase to Chapter 70, we still recommend voting for a 1/12 budget of $14.9 million, since the city has already approved this number. Furthermore, we still have millions remaining from July and August as reflected below. Oh, I'm sorry, I did it again, I'm tired. If you can see there, you'll see that there's $13 million in our accounts right now, so we still have plenty of money to cover the additional costs that September would bring. So,
all set. Mr. Hardy?
Motion to approve.
Okay, motion to approve by Mr. Hardy, seconded by Mr. Dakota. Roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Artie?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin? 7 yeas approved.
8.2, approval of UMass Lowell research proposal. Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you. This is our assistant principal over at the Lincoln Schools proposal. Frank's doing good work. I want to recognize him if he happens to be staying up. This is procedural, though. The committee's required to vote. He's not here. He might be online. There his, recommendations approval as written.
Any questions? Okay, motion to approve by Ms. Clark, seconded by Mr. Hoey. Roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Artie?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
Yes.
7 yeas approved.
8 through, sure. I think so. Go ahead.
I just would like to get the results of his study. I think it would be very interesting. I mean, he mentioned sharing it with the team, but I think the school committee could benefit from reading about it too.
Yeah,
learning what he
and I'm
wants.
sure once we can get in person, I'm sure he's going to be excited to do so. People get pretty excited once they get up to this point in
right,
their
thank you.
studies. The next one, 8.3, is again a procedural vote. It's newly required by our new auditor at the city. So this is new to the committee. These didn't typically come to you previously, if I'm correct, Ms. Turner.
Right.
The auditor now is requiring you to take action, so the recommendation's approval as written.
Motion by Mr. Artie, seconded by Mr. Dakota. Roll call.
Ms. Clark?
Yes.
Mr. Dakota?
Yes.
Mr. Dillon?
Yes.
Mr. Artie?
Yes.
Mr. Hoey?
Yes.
Mayor Leahy?
Yes.
Ms. Martin?
yes.
7 yeas approved.
Okay, before we adjourn, just one quick housekeeping thing. I know everybody's tired, they've been working hard, but, so I didn't have the correct agenda, and I didn't have that last report. So if we can just make sure when the packets go out. I know, it's, nobody's perfect, I just was missing a couple of things, so. I'll just double check them when they go out.
I appreciate you bringing me back to pre-COVID days, because this is like going to be the bane of existence between myself and the mayor here. I'm sorry again,
It's all
Mr.
right.
Mayor.
No, it happens.
There's
All right, motion adjourned by Ms. Clark, seconded by Mr. Dillon. Thank you.